Chapter 418. When this person first came to the manor, no one in the clan knew him, so this lowly one deliberately made friends with him. After a few times, we did have some friendship. One time, when we were drunk, we happened to talk about Manor Lord. I didn't expect this person to actually show some hatred towards Manor Lord. In the Zhaoyu side hall, Xiao Yi explained the situation one by one. When Zhang Yan heard this, he smiled and said, "It's nothing new that your Xiao clansman hates me. Not to mention that the whereabouts of Xiao Mu and Xiao Han were rumored to be unknown because of him, just the profound level weapon, the 5 Spirits White Carp Shuttle, was also obtained by him through trickery. Why would the Xiao clan give him any face?" Xiao Yi hurriedly explained, "It's not like that. He also said that in a few days, someone will come to deal with Manor Lord. However, this person is quite tight-lipped." This lowly one probed a few more times but was unable to get any more information. Remembering that Manor Lord's kindness to this lowly one is as heavy as a mountain, this lowly one specially came to report. "Oh." Zhang Yan's gaze turned and swept over his face, saying, "At least you have the heart." Xiao Yi didn't dare to meet his gaze and hurriedly lowered his head, saying, I don't dare. If it wasn't for Manor Lord's support, this lowly one wouldn't be who I am today." Zhang Yan smiled lightly and waved his sleeves, saying, "I already know. You should go back early to avoid suspicion in the clan." Xiao Yi stood up and bowed, not daring to say anything more, hurriedly taking his leave. After he left, the mirror spirit came up and said, "Master, although this person made an oath that day, he must be unwilling. Would he really be so kind?" Zhang Yan sneered, "Of course he wouldn't be so kind. But how could I not see through this little trick? The reason why he came here is because he was afraid that I would make trouble for him in the future after suffering a loss. But just this, he wouldn't be so anxious to find me. I'm guessing that Xiao Ao must have forced him to his current position in the clan, so he urgently came to find me. It would be best if he could use me to teach this person a lesson. Then he can rest in peace." He explained the pros and cons in one sentence, and the mirror spirit suddenly understood. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was the case. He couldn't help but say with admiration, "Master's eyes are indeed like a torch. You can see through me with one glance." However, a moment later, he said worriedly, "According to what this person said, I'm afraid that someone will come to make things difficult for Master. I wonder who it is." Zhang Yan stood up, flicked his sleeves and said with a smile, "Knowing or not, it's all the same. Why bother to think about it? You just need to guard the cave carefully." The mirror spirit quickly responded. After Zhang Yan explained, he did not go to the main hall for the banquet. He returned to the small pot mirror and deduced the wood element true light again. 3 months later, 500 kilometers away from bright Nether Lake, a sword light that seemed like a clear and cold moon tore through the sky. It was coming here. Lu Yenny rode her sword and flew into the sky. It had been almost 20 years since they parted. She had gone through a lot of hardships and had already found all kinds of external medicines to transform pills. She was wearing a bamboo-colored skirt. Her black hair was like a waterfall, draping over her shoulders and tied with a silver ring. Her expression was more elegant and refined than that day when she left the mansion. While flying, she suddenly felt a sense of danger and frowned slightly. She hurriedly turned the sword light and dodged to the side. She saw a smoke passing in front of her, causing her clothes to flutter. The person who sneaked up on her didn't say anything when he saw that his attack didn't hit. Instead, he controlled a big cloud to cover her. Before it landed, Lu Yenny felt her whole body tighten. It was as if she fell into an ice cocoon. The surrounding cold wind was rustling like an ice cyclone. At a glance, she saw that this cloud spread for more than 10 miles. It was not a place where she could escape in a hurry. She immediately guessed that the other party came prepared, so it was not suitable for her to fly by force. Instead, she took out the profound artifact boat mooring pouch that Zhang Yan had given her. She opened it and turned it into a crystal cloud, barely blocking it. She said quietly, which fellow Taoist is making things difficult for my daughter here? That cloud suddenly parted and a middle-aged Taoist nun flashed out from within. She looked at Lu Yenny twice and said expressionlessly, Lu Yenny, I have been waiting for you here for many days. Come with me now. Lu Yenny saw that the other party was wearing the Qinsang school uniform and seemed to be a core formation cultivator, so she didn't be rude. She curtsied and said, May I know which senior from the sect is here and where are you taking Yenny? The middle-aged Taoist nun said indifferently, I, Yu Longshan, can be considered as your senior. I heard that you are an outstanding figure among the younger generation of disciples in my sect, so I would like to invite you to stay in my glittering jewel cave for a few days. Quickly put away your transcendent artifact and come with me. That way, you can suffer less. When Lu Yenny heard the words glittering jewel cave, she immediately became alert. She held the sword pellet and said, Senior, please allow me to report. I have been traveling outside for several years and haven't seen my master for a long time. I am about to return to my residence to pay my respects. After the ceremony, if my master allows it, I am willing to pay a visit to your residence. Yu Longshan waved her hand and said with an extremely unyielding attitude, There is no need. The relationship between our sect is not shallow. Why should we disturb the seniors for such a small matter? Lu Yenny said seriously, Forgive me for not being able to comply. Yu Longshan became impatient and said, That is not up to you to decide. She took out a hand seal, and countless grains of white sand appeared in the air. They covered the sky and the sun as they swept over from all directions. They became smaller and smaller, and they were about to surround her. Lu Yenny quickly used the boat mooring pouch and released balls of crystal clouds to protect herself. Yu Longshan snickered coldly and continued to circulate her arcane energy above the clouds. Instantly, a boundless pressure came crashing down. Lu Yenny was only at the mystic light realm. Although the boat mooring pouch was a Xian artifact, her cultivation was one realm lower. She could only last for a while before finding it hard to resist. However, she was still calm and didn't panic. She held down the sword pellet and looked for a chance to break out. Yu Longshan smiled in disdain. I advise you not to struggle. I know that your sword movement technique is amazing and you will be able to escape as soon as you have the chance, but you won't be able to escape from my neon dust barrier. It is better to be obedient. As soon as she finished speaking, a chuckle sounded next to her ear. That may not be the case. Yu Longshan knew that the situation was bad, but before she could do anything, a jade arrow shot out from the air. It pierced through the clouds and created a hole. Although the hole closed as soon as it was created, the opportunity was gone in the blink of an eye. However, Lu Yenny grasped the opportunity and flew away with her sword in the blink of an eye. A ray of light flew out from within, and in a flash, it was already 10,000 feet away. In another flash, it disappeared without a trace. Yu Longshan's expression changed, and she shouted, Who is causing trouble here? This is the matter of the Qinsang school. Why do you have the right to interfere? A woman wearing colorful clothes and riding a 5-colored cloud walked out from the mist. Her hair was combed into a bun, and she had a pretty face. She blinked her eyes and pretended to be surprised. I was ordered by my master to protect fellow Taoist Lu in secret, and I saw someone bullying the weak. I thought it was a demon, but it turns out to be Senior Qinsang. Yu Longshan's face burned. Ever since she came out of seclusion, she was ignored by immortal Qin, so she couldn't help but feel depressed. Later, she heard that her master didn't get along with Zhang Yan, so she was eager to regain her master's favor. Someone from the same sect came up with an idea, saying that as long as his eldest disciple, Lu Yenny, was traveling outside, as long as they found the right time to invite her to live in the Qinsang school, they would definitely be able to threaten her and win her master's favor. She thought that this idea was not bad. However, as a core formation cultivator, he felt that he had no face to make things difficult for a junior for no reason. Now that he was being mocked by this woman, he became angry out of humiliation and shouted, Do you think you can stop me? She flicked her sleeve. She tossed a jade cup in the air and flipped it upside down. The mouth of the cup seemed to be spitting out light, and it actually contained a strange cold power. Before it arrived, it was as if ice water had soaked one's body, and the coldness penetrated one's bones and muscles. The colorful robed woman cried out in surprise and pointed at her bun. A hairpin suddenly flew forward, and with a ding sound, the jade cup was shaken to the side a few times. Seeing this, Yu Longshan hurriedly used an incantation to straighten it. This jade cup was very special, and it could only be controlled by pointing the mouth of the cup at the opponent. However, as soon as she turned it around, the hairpin flew over again and pecked at it, knocking it to the side. This made her feel uncomfortable. How could Yu Longshan be willing to be entangled with unrelated people here? Originally, she wanted to quickly deal with this woman and then chase after Lu Yenny. Perhaps she would still have a chance, but the more impatient she was, the more she couldn't get rid of her. The colorful robed woman saw that she was impatient, so she smiled in her heart. Her figure drifted back and forth, but she only entangled Yu Longshan. Every time a killing move came, she would dodge far away, and when she wanted to leave, she would go forward to stop her. After exchanging blows for a moment, Yu Longshan knew that she could no longer catch up to Lu Yenny, so she gave up and focused on fighting this woman. After all, she was under Taoist master Dong Tian, so she was experienced and knowledgeable. After exchanging blows for a while, she saw through this woman's background. She sneered and said, "I was wondering who was so daring to go against my Qinsang school. So it's a disciple of Li Mountain sect." Li Mountain sect was also one of the 10 sects of Xianmen, but compared to the other sects, their foundation was the shallowest, and they had only risen for a few thousand years. However, compared to the other 9 sects, they still had some advantages. The founding ancestor of the sect was still in the mountain. Almost with her strength alone, this sect just now had a foothold in the world. The colorful robed woman's background was exposed, but she didn't panic at all. She only said, could this Dao friend be one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsang school? Or is it because you're an elder in the sect? Why do you keep using the status of Qinsang school to pressure people? Are you bullying me because I'm not sensible? Yu Longshan was mocked by her words and felt even more embarrassed. She shouted and said, "Good, good. So the disciples of Li Mountain sect are all so eloquent. You blocked my way for no reason. Today, I'll capture you and let someone from your sect come to my residence to take you away." She stretched her hand into the sachet, and just as she was about to move, she felt a burst of cold air assaulting her. She was startled and hastily tilted her head to the side. A cold sword chi brushed past her forehead. Although she wasn't injured, her hair was disheveled, and she was in a sorry state. She couldn't help feeling shocked and angry at the same time. She looked up into the clouds and saw Lu Yenny's sleeves fluttering in the wind. She was standing there with 12 sword lights intertwining and circling around her. She was looking at her calmly. Yu Longshan didn't expect Lu Yenny to not leave just now. She actually dared to hide in the clouds and wait for a chance to kill her. Her hair was messed up by a junior. Even if she captured Lu Yenny and brought her back, she wouldn't be able to face anyone. After being stunned for a moment, she sighed and covered her face with her sleeves. She flew away on the clouds. The colorful robed woman saw that she had left and came up on the clouds. She said in surprise, "Dao friend Lu, why haven't you left?" Lu Yenny bowed to her solemnly and said, "Dao friend helped me escape. How can I leave without you?" Chapter 419. Hearing Lu Yenny's words, the colorful clothed woman had a good impression of her. She grinned at her and said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, aren't you afraid that the nun will go back and capture you? That treasure of hers is very strange, and she's on guard now. If I attack again, I might not be able to stop her." Lu Yenny smiled and shook her head. "It's fine. That senior used a treasure to capture me just now, which means that she doesn't have the confidence to stop the sword escape technique. That's why I dared to come back." The colorful clothed woman was stunned. After thinking about it again, it was indeed logical. However, To think of this in a critical moment, one had to be extremely calm and meticulous. She couldn't help but stare at Lu Yenny with her beautiful eyes wide open. She thought to herself, no wonder Master ordered me to secretly protect her. She really has a good eye for people and has never been wrong. This fellow Taoist will definitely be extraordinary in the future. Now that we've formed a good relationship, our sects will be considered friends. As she was thinking, Lu Yenny bowed to her again and said, I haven't asked for your name yet. The colorful clothed woman didn't accept her bow and moved to the side. She smiled and said, I'm a disciple of perfected Chao. My surname is Lu and my name is Qingmei. Nowadays, the demonic sects are becoming more and more rampant in the Donghua continent. Master is worried that it's not appropriate for you to return alone, so he ordered me to escort you. Lu Yenny's eyes lit up and revealed surprise. She then sighed and said, so you're Senior Chao's disciple. I've benefited a lot from Senior's guidance previously. I haven't thanked you yet, and I've troubled Senior's sister to send me back. I don't know how I can repay Senior's care and concern. Perfected Chao was a Yuanying elder of the Lishan sect. She was originally from the Wei imperial family, but she wasn't from the same branch as the current Wei royal family. Due to her outstanding talent, she was taken in as a disciple by the current patriarch of the Lishan sect. It was also because Lu Yenny came to the territory of the Lishan sect in search of medicine and met her by chance. Seeing that Lu Yenny's talent and temperament were both extraordinary and extremely similar to her younger self, Perfected Chao had the intention of taking her in as a disciple. However, after asking around, she found out that she was originally under the Qinsang school and was the disciple of one of the top 10 disciples, Zhang Yan. He couldn't help but feel that it was a pity, so he gave her a few pointers. Because he really liked her, after Lu Yenny left, he specially ordered Lu Qingmei to secretly escort her, just in case anything happened. At the same time, he could also do Zhang Yan a favor. Lu Qingmei waved her hand. It's just a small matter, don't worry about it, Taoist Lu. Lu Yenny smiled. Senior Sister Lu, the bright nether heavenly lake is not far away, why don't you come to the manor and have a seat? Lu Qingmei shook her head and declined. No, since you're safe, it's good enough. I still need to return to the cave residence to report on the completion of the task, so I won't disturb fellow Taoists' reunion. Lu Yenny did not force him. They were both cultivators and had long lifespans. They would meet again in the future. She entrusted Lu Qingmei and Taoist Master Chao with a few words of blessing before bidding them farewell and returning to the clear nether heavenly lake. In the small pot mirror, Zhang Yan was sitting on the top of the bamboo house with his eyes closed, circulating his Xian Qi. In the small pot mirror, he had already deduced the wood elemental true light technique and was now practicing it. Suddenly, the mirror spirit came out and came to the front. She said happily, Master, Lun Yangzi has returned and is waiting outside. She wants to see you. Zhang Yan opened his eyes and smiled. Yenny has been gone for more than 10 years, but she came back earlier than I expected. Go and bring her in to see me. The mirror spirit hurriedly accepted the order and went outside. She smiled at Lu Yenny. Lun Yangzi, please follow me. He turned around, and as the mirror light flashed, Lu Yenny felt a bright light in front of her. Then, she entered a place filled with fragrant trees, flowers, and a gurgling stream. Even though she was Zhang Yan's eldest disciple, it was the first time she entered the small pot mirror. She unconsciously took a few more glances. She saw that the pond water was clear, the sky was blue, and the fragrance assailed her nostrils. Butterflies fluttered and fishes swam in the water. It was clearly a world of its own. She was amazed. When she arrived at the bamboo house, she saw Zhang Yan sitting on the couch and looking at her with a smile. She hurriedly knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Disciple Lu Yenny pays respect to master and wishes for a long life. Zhang Yan saw that her body was full of qi of Tao. It was obvious that her cultivation had improved a lot since they parted. He raised his hand and said, Disciple, get up quickly. Lu Yenny bowed again and stood up. Zhang Yan asked gently, Yenny, what realm have you cultivated to now? Lu Yenny bowed and answered truthfully, reporting to master, disciple has reached the burning acupoint stage. Now I have opened 24 acupoints. 24 acupoints. That's not easy. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. The more acupoints a cultivator opened, the stronger the true fire and the greater the success of calcining the Jin Dan. He said, then you still need to work hard for a few more days. It won't be too late to condense the Jin Dan after you have opened a few more acupoints. He pointed with his finger and a golden talisman flew out. He said, this is the burning acupoint and the various acupoints. You have to remember it and don't underestimate it. When he opened 36 acupoints that day, it was due to fate. He had the mind-penetrating technique, so his corporeal body was not comparable to a normal cultivator. He also had the help of the remnant jade. He had to rely on himself to explore the acupoints and could not purely imitate it. However, ever since he became one of the top 10 disciples, he had read all the books in the Jin Luo courtyard. There was no lack of books that talked about the key to opening acupoints. Those who could enter the Jin Luo courtyard to read books had to be at least in the core transformation realm. Their status in the sect was not low, so there were some methods that were not hidden from him. Even if Zhang Yan did not use it himself, it did not mean that the sect would not use it. That was why he paid attention to it that day and read through it once. He remembered many of the key points. However, he would not use the experience of others. One of the advantages he had was that he could repeatedly test the method in the remnant jade. His experiments were successful, so he came up with a set of acupoint opening method. It could be said that this method could be passed down and become the sect's secret method. Lu Yenny relied on her innate talent to burn 24 acupoints. Later on, as her progress slowed down, she could vaguely feel that there might be a key point. Now that she saw Zhang Yan teaching her, she knew that it was a secret method. She held her breath and solemnly accepted it. Then, she knelt down and kowtowed to thank her master. Zhang Yan smiled and said, Disciple, stand up and talk. Lu Yenny stood up. She reached into the sachet and took out 2 porcelain bottles. She held them in her palm and said, Before master left, you told disciple to pay attention to the metal and fire qi. Disciple did not dare to forget, so I paid special attention to it. I also relied on some luck to be able to gather all of them. Zhang Yan's spirit was lifted. He waved his sleeve and a wisp of smoke flew out, sucking the 2 porcelain bottles over. He opened them and said, Not bad, this is the metal essence qi of Gengxin and fire essence qi of Gengxin. Disciple, you have done a great service this time. Lu Yenny's eyebrows were slightly worried. She bowed and said, Serving master is a disciple's responsibility. I dare not claim credit. It's just that these 2 qis are extremely rare. Disciple only has a little. Is it enough for master? Zhang Yan looked at the 2 jade bottles and said with a smile, It's enough. He did not want to cultivate the Taishian true light to the highest level. He only needed to be able to use it a little, then he could reverse the 9 mantras and use the power of the Dan Sha to refine it again. From then on, he would be able to get rid of the barriers and achieve a mystic technique. His disciple returned home and obtained the last 2 qis of the 5 elements true light. He was also in a good mood, so he asked Lu Yenny about her experiences along the way. Lu Yenny also answered attentively and told him about the current situation in the Donghua continent. This conversation between master and disciple actually took half a day. Zhang Yan then asked about the origin of the metal and fire qi. Just now, he knew that the metal essence qi of Gengxin was a gift from a female cultivator of the Yuanyang sect, but Lu Yenny did not know her name. As for the fire qi of Gengxin and Ding, it was obtained by Lu Yenny in a Feizhou celestial market in the south of the Donghua continent. Fortunately, she brought a lot of spirit shells with her before she left, and she spent everything to buy it. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was luck. If it were not for the qi of fire essence here, Lu Yenny would probably have to delay for a few more years. Just now, she was able to return home. In the end, Lu Yeni thought about it and decided to tell Zhang Yan about the attack when she returned home. It was not that she was bullied and wanted to complain to her master. Back then, when Zhang Yan was not yet one of the top 10 disciples in the sect, when he went out to look for medicine, the situation she faced was many times more difficult than what she was facing now. But she still made it through, and she was not that delicate. She was just worried that this matter might be harmful to the sect, so she had to mention it. After listening to her, Zhang Yan thought for a while, then nodded and said, "I already know about this matter. Go back and cultivate well. In a few days, I will personally protect you and help you condense the medicine into the core." Lu Yeni bowed and said, "Yes, master. I will take my leave." After sending this disciple out of the small pot mirror, Zhang Yan thought about it and shook his head slightly. It was unlikely that perfected Qin had sent someone from his sect to make things difficult for his disciple. No matter what, perfected Qin was still a perfected grotto heaven. Even if he really wanted to plot against him, why would he cast his eyes on his disciple? Moreover, it would be too damaging to his identity, and if word got out, he would not be able to keep his face. Therefore, he guessed that it was very likely that Yu Longshan had taken matters into her own hands. However, there was no smoke without fire. He could also sense the hidden hostility that the glittering grotto heaven had towards him behind this matter. He and perfected Peng had helped each other, so it was reasonable that perfected Qin did not like him. Zhang Yan had already expected this. However, logically speaking, even if he wanted to make things difficult for him, he should have waited for the right opportunity to act. It was a little puzzling that he had chosen this time. He thought about it carefully. These days, he had rarely left the mansion. The only time he did was to see sect leader Qin. This thought only lasted for a while before he came to a realization. The problem was very likely this. Sect leader Qin had promised him to go to the floating heavenly palace to cultivate. It was very likely that perfected Qin was unhappy with him because of this. Thinking about it this way, he cleared up his thoughts. There was also the matter of Xiao Ao. Now that he thought about it, it was probably related. Zhang Yan vaguely seemed to see a large net covering him. He sneered. Indeed, the benefits could not be obtained by him without any reason. It seemed that he had to go through some twists and turns. However, there was no need to think so much about it now. The most important thing right now was to cultivate the remaining 2 true lights. After deducing the cultivation method, he could refine the 5 elements mysterious skill into one. After that, he would condense the true seal of mana and raise his strength to another level. Only then would he have more confidence to speak. Chapter 420. Since Zhang Yan was preparing to go into closed-door training, it might take a long time, so he wanted to take care of all the worldly matters. He silently calculated the time. There were still 5 years before the next sect competition, but if he was right, there should not be many changes in the sect, so it did not matter whether he went or not. Currently, no one in the younger generation of the sect could compete with the top 10 disciples of his generation. The aristocratic families were declining, but there were many talented people in the sect, such as Feng Ming, Mo Tianhua, and others. Although there was news that they had turned medicine into pills and condensed pills, they were still far behind them due to the lack of foundation. Only Yu Chongyang was unfathomable, and no one knew his exact background. Although he was not a disciple of any enlightened abode master, he had a divine object that chose its master. Decades ago, he and Huang Fuzhou were known as the twin talents, and they had formed pills earlier than Zhang Yan. However, this person was low-key and obsessed with cultivation. He was in closed-door training all year round and rarely showed his face. It seemed that he had no intention of fighting for a position. As for Qin Nan, she was like Lu Yeni. Although she had reached the stage of burning acupoints, she had not turned medicine into pills and condensed pills. This was because Immortal Peng deliberately polished her foundation. Just now, her progress had slowed down. However, even if she could enter the transforming core realm in the next few years, she did not have many means to fight. Zhang Yan had promised Immortal Peng that he would help Qin Nan become one of the top 10 disciples, but he did not have to be too hasty. His own strength was not enough. If he waited until he entered the Yuanying realm, then he would have a greater chance of success. He pondered for a while, picked up a brush, and wrote a letter to the Shouming Palace. Not long after, a letter came back. It was Immortal Peng's reply. He opened it, smiled, and put it aside. Everything had been settled. When he was about to return to the small pot mirror to cultivate, he felt some changes in the formation. He carefully examined it, and his expression changed slightly. He waved his sleeves to open the restrictive formation and let in a talisman. He received it and saw that it was a letter from the sect leader. He opened it in surprise and couldn't help but shake his head and sigh, so it's about this matter. I still can't be idle. Previously, the sect leader had told him that within 30 years, he would receive a disciple to inherit the Jade Shade sect. Now, the time had come. Sect leader Qin had calculated that that person was in the Gong prefecture of the Great Wei state. Therefore, he only needed to receive that person as a disciple. However, the content of the sect leader's letter was a little strange. Not only did he only give him a deadline of 1 month, he also clearly stated that he could not take the initiative to ask for the sect leader's help, and that the sect leader must come to him on his own. If the sect leader did not come by then he would have missed the opportunity. Although Zhang Yan did not understand the deep meaning behind it, since the sect leader had passed down the decree, he had to go. He instructed the mirror spirit to guard the cave house, then he got up and flew out of the cave house toward the southeast direction. After traveling for more than 10 days, he arrived at the Gong prefecture of the Wei state. There were many hills and mountainous areas here, the scenery was beautiful, and there were lakes of different sizes scattered like stars in the sky. He circled several times on top of the cloud, and after several calculations, he saw a village with crisscrossed paths. In order to avoid shocking the world, he descended the cloud in the middle of the mountain forest, walked out of the mountain path, and headed toward the village. Just now, when he entered the village, he heard the sound of dogs barking. He saw a group of dirty children throwing mud at each other, chasing and playing, and making a ruckus. The older ones were about 15 or 16 years old, and the younger ones were only 7 or 8 years old. Among them, there was a teenager with thick eyebrows and dark skin. He was wrestling with several strong and sturdy teenagers of similar age. The rest of the older children were shouting and jeering at the side. This dark-skinned teenager had some courage, but he couldn't fight against so many people. After a while, he was beaten to the ground, and his hands and feet were held down, and he was shouting and yelling. At this time, a young man wearing silk clothes came over, and he was only 13 or 14 years old. His skin was white, and there were 2 faint hairs at the corner of his mouth. There were 2 long attendants beside him, and he should be from a rich family in the countryside. He only heard him say, "Song San Air, the day before yesterday you used feces to dirty my new clothes. Today I'll beat you up to teach you a lesson." The dark-skinned teenager's face flushed red, but he was held down tightly, and couldn't get up. The young man who looked like a young man learned from the adults, and after throwing down a few harsh words, he went away proudly. Zhang Yan stood in the distance, and his eyes patrolled among them. He only looked for a while, but he couldn't see any of them who had the foundation of cultivation. But if it was really so easy to find, the sect master probably wouldn't have set a time limit of 1 month. But this didn't stump him. After thinking for a while, he looked at the dark-skinned teenager sitting on the ground, and he had a plan. Zhang Yan walked up to him, and said with a smile, "You young man, I see that you have a strong body, how can you be bullied like this?" The dark-skinned teenager suddenly saw an unfamiliar Taoist come over to talk to him, and was a little stunned. But seeing that Zhang Yan was friendly, he wasn't afraid, and argued, "Wang Sanlang and the others are shameless. With so many people against me, of course I can't beat them." Zhang Yan shook his head, and said, "That's not necessarily true, numbers don't mean anything. Have you ever heard of a fierce general who can take on 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 in battle? The dark-skinned teenager had also heard of these strange legends and historical anecdotes from the down-and-out scholars in the countryside, and when he heard Zhang Yan talking about this, he immediately forgot about his pain, and said, I've heard of it, I've heard of it. Master Daoist can't defeat me, and I heard from the teachers in the village that one of the founding ministers of Wei, there's a man called Zhuo Gongchang, who has the courage to take on 10,000 men. Zhang Yan smiled, and said, that's the courage to take on 10,000 men. Yes, yes, cloth, cloth. The teenager scratched the back of his head, and smiled embarrassedly. Zhang Yan saw that he was stupid, and did not correct him, and only smiled, and said, then let me ask you, do you want to learn this technique? The teenager was stunned, and then he jumped up, and grabbed the corner of Zhang Yan's shirt, and shook it, and said urgently, Master Daoist, teach me, Master Daoist, teach me. Zhang Yan smiled, and said, come closer. The dark-skinned teenager was anxious, and quickly moved his head closer, but Zhang Yan did not mind, and whispered a few incantations in his ear, and then patted the back of the teenager's head, and said, go. The teenager couldn't help but shiver, and walked out of the field in a daze. Zhang Yan looked at his back, and smiled, and then walked up the mountain with light steps. Halfway up the mountain, he found a dilapidated mountain god temple, sat on a praying mat, and waited patiently. When the dark-skinned teenager returned home, he couldn't help but think of the incantation that the Taoist said, and it was very strange. He had never read or learned to write, but Zhang Yan only said it once, and he remembered it in his heart. He couldn't forget it even if he wanted to, and he didn't need to understand it, the meaning was self-evident. He followed the incantation, and after a night, he jumped down from his bed, and felt that his body was light and healthy, and his eyes and ears were sharp, and his body had endless strength. In his joy, he excitedly ran out to find the Wang family's young master, and when he passed by a pond, he saw 2 water buffaloes blocking his way. His heart was moved, and he ran up to them, and pulled their horns. The water buffaloes mooed twice, and were dragged to the ground by him. This made him even more excited. After running for less than a mile, he saw Wang Sanlang leading a group of teenagers there, shooting birds with slingshots. He shouted, and without saying anything, he rushed forward and made a move. This time, he easily knocked over a dozen youths to the ground. Not a single one of them was his opponent, and Wang Sanlang was even pinned to the ground and given a good beating. But the strange thing was, even though he hit them hard, no one was injured, and there weren't even any scratches. It seemed like there was no enmity between these children playing around. Afterwards, Wang Sanlang asked, Song San, how did you learn all these skills in just one night? The dark-skinned teenager was honest and straightforward, and also had the temperament of a teenager, so he couldn't keep his mouth shut, and so he bragged about meeting Zhang Yan and teaching him. Wang Sanlang secretly noted it down, and ordered his follower to find the whereabouts of the Taoist from yesterday. Zhang Yan meditated in the mountain deity temple for 2 days, and on the 3rd day at noon, he suddenly heard footsteps coming from outside the door. He opened his eyes, and saw several servants in green robes and hats rushing in, all drenched in sweat, and panting non-stop. Behind them, another person walked in, and it was the young master that he saw the other day. When he came up the mountain, he was also panting with a red face. When Wang Sanlang saw Zhang Yan, his eyes lit up, and came up to him, and respectfully bowed, saying, Greetings, Taoist. Then, he waved his hand, and the attendant behind him brought out 2 plates. On one plate was a box of candied plums, and on the other plate were several copper coins wrapped in red silk, as well as 2 privately minted silver ingots. He stole a glance at Zhang Yan, and then bowed deeply, saying, Please accept it, Taoist. Zhang Yan looked at them a few times, and smiled, saying, You're here to ask for the Dharma. Wang Sanlang's face was full of surprise, and he nodded his head, saying, Yes, yes. Zhang Yan nodded, That's easy, come closer. Wang Sanlang hurriedly said, Wait. He looked at Zhang Yan with a burning gaze and said, Taoist priest, I would like to ask a question. I wonder if Taoist priest has a way to last for a long time, and not just for 2 or 3 days. The dark-skinned youth was excited for less than 2 days, but he found that the chi in his body had unknowingly leaked out, and he no longer felt as strong as he was a few days ago. After that, no matter how hard he tried, he could not remember the incantation from that day. Wang Sanlang's family had produced a high scholar, and he was much more knowledgeable than the dark-skinned youth. He thought that the Taoist would not pass down Tao techniques for no reason, so he must be asking for something. If there was a dharma that lasted for a few days, could there be a dharma that lasted for a few months? Or even a few years, or even a few decades? The more he thought about it, the more excited he was. He secretly despised Song San for not being knowledgeable, and missed out on a master, so he went to consult the master of his family. After that, he found out about Zhang Yan's whereabouts, and came looking for him. Zhang Yan responded with an "oh," and said, "You're looking for a method that will not leak out qi." Yes, the qi will leak out in less than 2 days, then what's the use of it? Wang Sanlang nodded his head repeatedly, his expression excited. From the Taoist's tone, it seemed that there was indeed such a method, then would he still need to study in the future? With this ability, he could join the military, and after killing a few Hu generals, he might be able to ask for a wife and children, and bring honor to his ancestors. Zhang Yan thought for a while, and said, "That's easy, do you know the Earth Temple on the slope 10 miles away?" Wang Sanlang did not react, and said, "Earth Temple." The long attendant immediately came forward, and said, "Young master, that's the Bat King Temple." Hearing the 3 words Bat King Temple, Wang Sanlang could not help but shiver. That Bat King Temple was originally a Earth Temple. In the first year of the current dynasty, it was said that a Taoist brought hundreds of virgin boys and girls there to cultivate, saying that he was suppressing some demonic aura. As a result, in one night, a foul wind blew, and everyone, including the Taoist, disappeared. Since then, no one dared to go there anymore. Even now, passers-by could faintly hear the sound of a zither in the middle of the night, and it was said that there was a female spirit that appeared, eating and drinking human blood. Wang Sanlang was a little frightened, and said, "Why did Taoist mention this ghost temple?" Zhang Yan looked at them with a smile that was not a smile, and said, "From today onwards, every night at midnight, whoever comes to see me in this Bat King Temple, I will impart that method to that person." Chapter 421. The mournful wailing in the Bat King Temple suddenly disappeared the moment Zhang Yan stepped into the temple. The huge Dan Sha on his body was constantly circulating and protecting his body. He did not need to use it deliberately. Even if a little of it leaked outside, it was enough to suppress the yin qi in the temple. There were more than 10 beasts in the temple that looked like cats and beavers with tiger stripes on their bodies. They were lying on the ground and looked at him in fear. They were trembling all over. Zhang Yan did not care about them. He looked around coldly and his eyes emitted a foot-long white light that looked like a sharp sword aura. The temple should have been abandoned for 100 years, but there was no dust or cobwebs around it. Instead, it seemed like someone often swept it. He knew that it was the beasts' doing. This must be their daily residence, which was why they took care of it. The temple was not small. It was divided into a front and a back hall. He walked to the back hall and looked up. He saw a statue of the earth god standing on the altar. Although it looked kind, it had protruding lips and ears. Its sharp teeth were exposed. It had red eyes and black skin. There was white hair on its cheeks. It did not look like a human. Zhang Yan thought to himself. Since the temple was named after the Bat King, it should be a bat spirit that cultivated into a demon and was later worshipped by the local villagers as the earth god. This was not unusual. For example, in a remote rural area, if the spirits were willing to protect the safety of the people and prevent them from being harmed by evil spirits, not only would they be able to cultivate well, they would also be able to enjoy incense and blood. Even the Taoist priests of Taoism Palace would not come looking for trouble. However, after looking at it a few more times, he could see that something was wrong. With a wave of his hand, he peeled off the layer of dry mud on the statue. The dark wood grain underneath was revealed. There was a light yellow talisman pasted on it. He laughed coldly and said, there is no formation here. I was wondering why the yin qi was so stagnant. So the root cause is here. The statue of the earth god temple was only covered with a layer of mud on the outside and painted with a layer of paint. The inside was carved with a yin wood that had been refined by magic. It was unknown what kind of secret technique was used to make this wooden statue. Originally, it could be used to ward off evil, but now, it was hiding yin within yin. Their souls would be sucked in and imprisoned within to be refined with yin qi. Over time, it would become a place to raise devils. If you didn't care about it and didn't care about it, a demon would definitely be born in 100 years. Such a method. With one look, he knew that the disciples of the devil sect lacked devil heads to refine their evil arts, so they took a different path and nurtured devil heads. Now that the devil tribulation had started, there were countless devil heads in the devil's cave. It was so that there was no need to resort to such methods. This was probably the reason why the temple was abandoned here. Over the past hundreds of years, it was unknown how many spirits had been imprisoned and refined within the wooden statue. Just like at this moment, there were more than 10 newly captured spirits that were suffering from the pain of soul refinement. Originally, he was in great pain, but with Zhang Yan in front of him, he was unable to make a sound due to the immense pressure from his body. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. Although this place was already abandoned, it was inevitable for a living person to be in a trance when they were tainted by the yin qi. Strange phenomena appeared frequently in front of him, and as time went on, it would hurt his vitality. Since he had seen it, he couldn't let it go on like this. He pointed his finger at the talisman. With a soft sound, the spell was broken. The wooden statue trembled a few times and couldn't restrain the spirits anymore. The 10 spirits came down from the statue and bowed to Zhang Yan a few times before dispersing. Zhang Yan didn't care about them. He flicked his sleeves and a streak of purple lightning flew out. It circled around the wooden statue and swept away the yin qi that had been accumulated for hundreds of years. After doing this, he was about to find a place to meditate. The dozen strange beasts had been watching his movements. At this time, a strange beast with a short nose and bright fur folded its ears back. It called out a few times and came over with a clean praying mat in its mouth. It stood up and bowed to him like a human. Zhang Yan nodded his head and said, "You guys are sensible." He pondered for a moment and took out a pill. "I've destroyed your hiding place, so I'll give you this form transformation pill." The strange beast seemed to be pleasantly surprised and used its mouth to bring it over. After bowing to Zhang Yan a few times, it went to the side and called out a few times before leading the group of strange beasts out of the temple. In an instant, they disappeared without a trace. Zhang Yan sat down on the praying mat and closed his eyes, waiting for the fated person to come to him. When he was talking to Wang Sanlang, he did not deliberately avoid the manservants. Even though Wang Sanlang specifically told him not to tell anyone, the news of the Celestial Master's teachings still spread like wildfire, causing an uproar. Although there were many people who were moved, when they heard that they were going to the Bat King Temple. However, he flinched and shrank back. However, there were still some fearless people who dared to take the risk and come here. But the strange thing was, when the villagers woke up the next day, they found themselves lying in their own beds. They couldn't remember what happened yesterday, but their bodies were much stronger than before. Once this news spread out, it attracted even more people to head over there. More than 20 miles away from the Bat King Temple, there was a place called Wei Village. At the west of the village was a thatched hut that was leaking wind everywhere. Inside the hut, a child was holding a small piece of neatly cut cotton cloth and was carefully wiping the saliva hanging on the corner of his sick mother's mouth. He said softly, "Mother, rest in peace. I'm going to accompany Tong Si's young master to study." The old woman's eyelids moved as a response. This child was called Wei Zihong. His father was recruited to dig a canal a few years ago. In the end, he contracted an illness and died, leaving only an orphan and a widow at home. He was still young, and the Wei family was paralyzed. They could only rely on the help of their neighbors and relatives to survive, so their family was very poor. When he heard that there was an celestial master who had a way to make people strong enough to fight 100 people, he made up his mind to take him as a disciple. He didn't think too much about it. He just wanted to have a body full of strength and earn some money to cure his mother's illness. He wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing anymore. Wei village was more than 20 miles away from the Bat King Temple. It wasn't much for the villagers, but for a child like him, it was extremely difficult. If he went alone, not to mention human traffickers and bandits, even wild wolves could take him away. Although he was only 7 or 8 years old, he had the experience of an adult. A few days ago, he had made an agreement with a traveling merchant he was familiar with to set off together when this person was selling goods. At this time, the sky was slightly white. He was afraid that he would miss the time, so he decided to go earlier. He first carried half a dry biscuit with him, then went to the neighbor's house to get some boiled water. He poured it into the gourd and tightly stuffed it. Then he found a few rags and stuffed some hay inside. Finally, he used hemp rope to tie his calf. He stomped a few times, and seeing that it wouldn't fall, he went out the door and found the traveling merchant. He was also sensible and tactful. Although he was small, he still helped the merchant carry a basket. 4 hours later, they arrived at the town. From here to the Bat King Temple was about 5 miles away, and it wasn't even midnight yet. He asked for a small piece of realgar from the traveling merchant, and after bidding farewell, he went into the forest alone. After walking for a short while, he saw a big tree and climbed up to find a thick tree trunk with dense leaves. He leaned on it and rested. It was also because he was tired from walking. After a while, he fell asleep. After sleeping for an unknown period of time, he suddenly felt some movement. When he opened his eyes to take a look, he saw a little white-furred monkey was opening its big round eyes and continuously pushing him. Wei Zihong turned over and touched his head. "Little monkey, is this your place?" He looked up and saw that the sky was already dark. He slapped his head and shouted, oh no, I don't want to miss the time to become apprentices." He looked around. At this time, the night was dark, and he was in the wilderness. He couldn't see his fingers in front of him, and it was hard to identify the path ahead. However, he had a skill, and that was being able to see things in the dark. This was also the reason why he had the confidence to come and become apprentices. At this time, he faintly saw a light coming from a boundary in front of him. Looking at the direction, it happened to be the direction of the Bat King Temple. He hurriedly climbed down from the tree and ran towards the light. That little white monkey suddenly jumped up and landed on his shoulder. Wei Zihong's footsteps paused, and he asked curiously, "Little monkey, are you also going to become apprentices?" The little white monkey squeaked a few times and kept nodding. Wei Zihong saw that it was quite intelligent, and he felt a little happy. He touched its fur and felt that it was quite soft and smooth. He said, "Then let's go together." The little white monkey squeaked a few more times, and Wei Zihong laughed a few times. He then let it climb on his body and ran forward. He often heard that this place was haunted, and even though he mustered up his courage to come, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Maybe it was because of his good luck, nothing strange happened in this boundary that was rumored to be extremely dangerous in the past. He actually arrived in front of the Bat King Temple safely. It was just that there was still light in the distance, but when he got closer, it was pitch black, and not a single sound could be heard. Wei Zihong was after all a child, and he felt a little afraid in his heart. His footsteps slowed down a lot, but when he thought of his old mother who was paralyzed in bed, he instantly became determined again. He walked forward, and with a squeak, he pushed open the old door of the temple. He stuck his head out and stepped in. Seeing that there was no movement, he became more courageous and carefully walked in. After about 20 steps, he turned around a layer of cloth, and saw a young Taoist who was meditating with his eyes closed sitting there. He couldn't help but widen his eyes, and then he came to his senses. He hurriedly knelt on the ground and said with a crisp child's voice, "Little kid Wei Zihong, I'm looking for Taoists to become apprentices." When he finished, he repeatedly kowtowed. Zhang Yan opened his eyes and looked at the child. He saw that there was a fringe in front of his forehead, and his body was frail and his skin was fair. He looked thin and small, as if he would be blown away by the wind, but his eyes were lively, and his physique was even more extraordinary. He thought to himself, could it be this child? These days, there were more than 10 people who came to him to become apprentices, but they were not the person he was looking for, and their physique was too poor, so they couldn't learn Tao techniques. He gave them a few pointers on ways to strengthen their bodies, and then sent them back. He said gently, since you're here to become apprentices, then come up. Wei Zihong followed his words and walked forward. When he stood still, Zhang Yan stretched out his hand, as if he was going to lift up the fringe in front of his forehead. Wei Zihong instantly panicked, and covered his forehead with both hands, saying, Taoist, you can't. Zhang Yan put down his hand, and smiled, why not? Wei Zihong still used both hands to cover his forehead, and replied seriously, Taoist, there's something strange here, if others see it, they will immediately faint. Chapter 422. Hearing Wei Zihong's words, Zhang Yan smiled and didn't force him. With his eyesight, he didn't need to lift his eyes to see that there was a mark on Wei Zihong's forehead that looked like a closed eye. It was similar to the 3 eyes that sect leader Qin mentioned. He was sure that this person was the person he was looking for. He looked at the white monkey on Wei Zihong's shoulder. If it wasn't for this spiritual beast that blocked the beasts in the forest, it wouldn't have been so easy to reach this place. This little monkey had good intentions, but it ruined his plan. Zhang Yan shook his head. This was an unintentional act, so he didn't want to dwell on it. He flicked his finger and a medicinal pill flew out, landing in front of the white monkey. Unexpectedly, the white monkey squeaked and shook its head, but it didn't want to let go of Wei Zihong's clothes. Zhang Yan couldn't help but laugh, you animal, you're quite clever. This little white monkey was a spiritual beast in the forest, and it could tell that Zhang Yan was here to accept a disciple. Although it had gained intelligence, it didn't have the bloodline of a great monster. Without guidance, it would be hard to pass the stage of transformation. Although the medicinal pill was good, how could it compare to following Wei Zihong and finding a better way out? Zhang Yan didn't pay attention to it anymore, and only said to Wei Zihong, since you're here, and you're sincere in wanting to be my disciple, I can see that you have a good physique. Are you willing to follow me back to the mountain to cultivate? Wei Zihong was startled, but he lowered his head and said, Taoist, I can't go with you. Zhang Yan asked in a pleasant tone, is there something that's troubling you? Wei Zihong hesitated for a moment, then he gathered his courage and answered loudly, my mother is sick in bed. If I leave, there's no one to take care of her. Zhang Yan nodded and said, we cultivators don't cut off our emotions. You have a respected mother, so you should take good care of her. I have 2 ways for you to choose. First, I'll teach you a spell. Once you've learned it, you'll be immune to all diseases. I have boundless strength and can fight against 10,000 people. It's not difficult to fight against a duke or marquis for 10,000 generations. Second, I'll bring you and Lao Mu back to the monastery. It's just that it's lonely in the mountains, cultivating the Tao is simple and hard, eating wind and drinking dew. Sleeping rock and crouching ice are just common things. You can choose between these 2 methods. If it was a person who wholeheartedly pursued the Tao, then he would naturally choose the second option without any hesitation. However, if a person who had the heart for riches and honor coveted that lifetime of glory, splendor, wealth, and rank, then he would choose the first option. Because of Wei Zihong's special identity, no matter what choice he made, Zhang Yan would bring him back to the sect. However, since he had taken him as his disciple, he wanted to observe his temperament. Wei Zihong listened. He didn't even think and said without hesitation, disciple is willing to choose the second option. Zhang Yan asked curiously, why did you choose the second option? Wei Zihong replied without hesitation, teacher has taught your disciple the Dharma access, and your disciple can serve mother. But how can I repay the kindness of imparting my skills to you? Such simple words could only be said by a child. Only a child could say this. After Zhang Yan heard this, he couldn't help but laugh out loud and said, "Good disciple, then quickly go and pick up your mother. Today, you can follow your master." Then he stretched out his hand and patted the back of his head. Wei Zihong suddenly felt as if there were countless things in his mind, and his body seemed to have endless strength. Looking at his hands, he couldn't help but be surprised and said happily, "Teacher, disciple will be back soon." Zhang Yan nodded slightly, and then he glanced at the little white monkey before he said indifferently, "If anything happens to my disciple on the way, then I'll hold you accountable." The little white monkey's entire body trembled, and it squeaked repeatedly, obviously indicating that it understood. Zhang Yan thought in his heart, sect leader once said that before this child entered the sect, he would have to suffer a small calamity. I originally planned to let him suffer a little more when he came here, so that he could avoid this calamity and save some trouble. I didn't expect that God's plan would be disrupted by this little monkey. Well, since I can't avoid it, then I will accept it. With Zhang Yan's help, Wei Zihong walked as if he was flying. After leaving the Bat King Temple, he hurried home. This time, it only took him less than an hour to return home. When he arrived in front of his bed, he whispered to his mother with a face full of joy, "Mother, your son has received the care of the immortal master. Today, I will go to the sect to cultivate. I will take you with me." After saying that, he helped his mother up and carried her on his back. Although Madame Wei had been ill for a long time, she was still an adult. Usually, when Wei Zihong helped her turn over and wipe her body, it would take a lot of effort. But now, he didn't feel it was difficult at all and easily carried her on his back. His heart was filled with joy and excitement, and he couldn't help but feel grateful to Zhang Yan for teaching him such a immortal method. At this moment, 1,000 miles away from the Bat King Temple, in a cave deep in the mountains, a Taoist in a black robe with a hairpin in his hair was looking at a broken jade pendant in his hand expressionlessly. He was a disciple of the Devil Sect, Hunching Sect. He was sent to guard this place under the orders of his master. This was also a hard job. Within a radius of tens of thousands of miles, all the restrictions and formations set up by his master were under his watch. Just now, he suddenly noticed that a talisman passed down by his master had dimmed. But looking at its layout, he didn't know how many years it had been since it was set up, and it didn't have much use at all. But according to the rules of the sect, even if the layout had been abandoned for a long time, he couldn't ignore it. He cursed for a while. Although he was extremely unwilling, he could only crush the talisman in his hand. He closed his eyes and sensed for a moment. Once he knew the location, he flicked his sleeve and summoned a wisp of green smoke. In an instant, he flew up and rushed toward that place. This green smoke was given to him by his master. It was a flying treasure that made it convenient for him to come and go. Even if it was 1,000 miles away, he would be able to reach it in an instant. But along the way, he was leisurely and deliberately walked very slowly. If the person who destroyed the restriction had already left, he would only need to take a look and then return. He didn't want to be involved at all. In a flash, he was 100 miles away from the Bat King Temple. The leisurely expression on his face disappeared and became a little more serious. He used a few spells and hid his body. Just now, he dared to go forward. Now, although many of the disciples of the demon faction acted unscrupulously, and although he knew that there were no experts among the mortals, he was still extremely careful and didn't dare to underestimate the person who came. He hid in the clouds and looked down. The aura below was extremely shocking. It was vast and majestic, and it faintly shot up to the sky. Who knew how much higher than his cultivation level was? He was shocked and thought to himself, so dangerous, so dangerous. If he just now rashly came out, wouldn't he be right under this person's blade? After looking a few more times, the fear in his eyes became even stronger. Although he had a flying treasure with him, the person in the temple below was at least at the core transformation realm, so he immediately wanted to leave. Just as he was turning his head around, he unintentionally caught a glimpse of a child walking swiftly towards him. Even though he was carrying a person on his back, he was still able to walk as if he was flying, which inevitably attracted his attention. After a few glances, his heart was moved, and he said, "This kind of bone structure, it's quite good." He looked a few more times and suddenly his body trembled. He said, "Could it be?" For a moment, he couldn't care about anything else and rushed forward. A ray of light fell down and swept the child up. Wei Zihong was walking forward with light steps. Seeing the Bat King Temple in the distance, he suddenly felt his body become light. He was pulled up to the top of the clouds, and his mother and the little white monkey fell to the ground. He couldn't help but feel anxious and exclaimed. He looked up and saw a strange Taoist sitting in front of him. The Taoist was staring at him with his eyes wide open. Because he didn't look like a good person, Wei Zihong said cautiously, "Who are you? Why did you catch me? Quickly let me down." The black-robed Taoist snorted and stretched out his hand to lift the fringe on Wei Zihong's forehead. When he saw a closed-eye scar, he instantly revealed an expression of ecstasy and almost danced with joy. He said repeatedly, "It really is you, it really is you." Then he smiled proudly and said, "Just follow me. This time, I've picked up a treasure." Although he was secretly delighted, he was afraid of Zhang Yan at the side, so he didn't want to say much and was about to sweep Wei Zihong away. At this moment, he heard a loud sound behind him. When he looked back, he saw a pale baleful qi overturning the roof of the Bat King Temple. A sword pellet flew out from the qi and turned into a flash of light. It was as fast as lightning and slashed towards him. Flying sword? The black-robed Taoist was instantly scared out of his wits. He was actually a sword cultivator. Could he be from Shaoqing? If that was the case, even if he had a flying treasure, it would be hard for him to escape. How would he dare to stay for a moment longer? He immediately turned around and wanted to escape. At this moment, Wei Zihong also noticed that something was wrong. He panicked and his qi and blood surged up. He felt a pain on his forehead and the eye scar on it suddenly opened, releasing a sharp light that shone right on the black-robed Taoist's face. The black-robed Taoist's entire attention was on the flying sword, so he didn't expect such a change. He was caught off guard and screamed. He covered his eyes, and blood flowed out from the gaps between his fingers like a fountain. With this delay, a sword light attacked and slashed through his neck. In an instant, his head was chopped off and his corpse fell to the ground. Once the black-robed Taoist died, Wei Zihong also fell from the sky. At this moment, a cloud of smoke flew over and wrapped around him. In the blink of an eye, he was on top of the cloud. Zhang Yan lowered his head to take a look, and then he placed his hand on her wrist. He knew that she was fine, so he nodded and flicked his sleeve to bring Madame Wei and the little white monkey up. After he determined the direction, he rode a cloud and flew away. At this moment, Wei Zihong also had a splitting headache and felt weak all over. He felt that all the strength that Zhang Yan had given him just now was gone in an instant. Usually, when he opened the strange eye on his forehead, he would feel dizzy and had to stay in bed for a few days. Only now was he able to recover. Forcefully using the strange eye to look at people just now had consumed a lot of his qi. After a while, he fell into a deep sleep. After sleeping for an unknown period of time, when he woke up, he found that he was in midair. He touched his body left and right, and out of curiosity, he carefully looked down. Seeing this, Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Disciple, you're awake. Once you pass the mountain in front, you'll be able to return to the sect." However, at this moment, his eyes narrowed. Suddenly, he saw a Taoist who looked like a cool breeze and bright moon standing in the cloud. The Taoist bowed to him and said in a loud voice, "Junior brother Zhang, you're back. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Zhang Yan took a look and saw that it was Luo Qingyu, one of the top 10 disciples like him. He calmly stepped forward and bowed to him, saying, "I wonder why senior brother Luo has been waiting for me here." Luo Qingyu snorted and said lightly, "I heard that junior brother Zhang has been practicing Dao techniques for the past few years and has made great progress. I also have some insights and would like to ask you for advice." To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 423. Zhang Yan and Luo Qingyu rarely interacted, but now that the latter had suddenly come to him to ask for advice, he knew that there must be a reason behind it. For Luo Qingyu to come here personally, the identity of the person behind this was obvious. He could not help but speculate that this might be because sect leader Qin had allowed him to borrow the floating heavenly palace, which had provoked the Jinren to attack him. Although Luo Qingyu had said that it was a spar, he could already imagine that if he was defeated by this person, Luo Qingyu's master would definitely complain to the sect leader that he was not qualified to cultivate in the floating heavenly palace. As for avoiding the battle, it was not a good choice. Luo Qingyu was blocking his way to the clear serenity heavenly lake. If he took a detour, it would be fine, but if he did so, it would be a show of weakness. Not only would it damage his own reputation, but it would also make the masters in the sect look down on him. The person behind this would then have more reason to make things difficult for him and ruin his plans. Since the other party had already made his move, he could only react accordingly, and there was no reason for him to back down. Zhang Yan quietly raised his hand and brushed it over Wei Zihong's head. A gust of clear air covered the scar on his eye. Then, he gave a gentle push, and a cloud separated and pushed Wei Zihong away. He said, "My disciple, I have some matters to attend to. Take your mother and wait at the side." Wei Zihong was wrapped up by the cloud, and in an instant, he was hundreds of feet away. Luo Qingyu casually glanced at him and said, "This child has a good physique. Is he your new disciple, junior apprentice brother?" Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "This time I went to the mortal world, I did not expect to find a good disciple, it is also my good luck." Putting aside the eye on Wei Zihong's forehead, there were many people with the same level of talent as him in the 9 cities and continents. Hence, Luo Qingyu only glanced at him once before turning his attention to Zhang Yan. He said seriously, "It's a pity that I didn't fight with junior brother Zhang during the competition that day, but you and I are from the same sect. If we were to fight, it would hurt our friendship. How about this, I have a Qingping Han Yen formation diagram that I have refined for many years. I originally wanted to show its power in the sword competition of the 16 sects and meet the masters of the various sections. Now, I would like to ask junior brother Zhang to give me some pointers first." Zhang Yan's expression did not change. He cupped his hands and said, "I was just about to experience senior brother's brilliance." Luo Qingyu nodded his head. He gave a clear shout and conjured a spell. He then placed an array diagram beneath his feet and placed it between the two of them. The diagram expanded for a few miles in an instant, covering both the heavens and the earth. Then, it suddenly shook and activated its spiritual vigor. It released countless clear lights and auspicious qi and played a strange melody. The melody was beautiful and elegant, like a clear spring that flowed into one's heart. Zhang Yan looked at it attentively and saw that it was like an unfolding picture scroll. The mountains and rivers were connected, the heavens and the earth were clean, and the sky was clear. Although he could only see a corner of it, he could see that it was full of mysteries. Luo Qingyu raised his eyebrows and stretched out his hand to lead the way. He said loudly, "Junior brother Zhang, please." It was also because they were from the same sect that he politely invited Zhang Yan to enter the formation. If he were to fight with an enemy, he only needed to use the formation during the battle. If the opponent was unprepared, he would not be able to avoid it and would be dragged into the formation in an instant. Zhang Yan smiled slightly, waved his sleeves and entered the formation. The details of the formation were unknown. If he entered it rashly, he would not be able to break the formation without breaking the spell. If he were to be trapped in it, although it would not be serious, it would be a great humiliation. However, he had something to rely on, so he was not afraid. Luo Qingyu saw that he entered the formation without hesitation. He also secretly praised him and said, "Junior brother Zhang's temperament is really a good seed of cultivation. He came here under the order of his master to fight with Zhang Yan. But before he came here, Jinren Yan had secretly instructed him not to overdo it. He just needed to put on a show and it would be fine if he won or lost." He secretly tried to figure out his master's intention. He always did not want to offend Jinren Peng, who was behind Zhang Yan. Therefore, after thinking about it, he decided to meet him with the formation diagram. As soon as Zhang Yan entered the formation, he saw that the scene in front of him had changed. As far as the eye could see, there was a stretch of mountains, overlapping and disorderly, which seemed to be endless. The mountains were arranged in a mysterious formation. On top of each mountain, there was a flag. When the flag was waved, thousands of layers of green smoke and thousands of miles of thunder clouds were roaring and rolling. The dust covered the sun. Seeing that a stranger came in, the green wind suddenly swept over. With a command in his heart, Zhang Yan released a meter-long protective treasure light to block the wind. However, the green wind was like a sharp blade that sliced off a layer in the blink of an eye, and he was slightly shocked when he saw how sharp it was. At this time, Luo Qingyu also entered the formation map. He peeked out from the high green wind and said in a clear voice, "Junior brother Zhang, in this formation, I am practicing the Qingji wind and thunder ritual. I know that you have the purple heaven thunder. Today, let's see which is more powerful, the thunder that I have cultivated or the purple heaven thunder that you have cultivated." This wind and thunder ritual method required one of the 5 skills, Green Spirit Manifestation Method. With the help of the array peak, it could grow and multiply without interruption. The array peaks in the formation diagram were not illusions, but were refined by Luo Qingyu by collecting the essence of heaven and earth and the 10,000-year-old primordial tree. In the past hundreds of years, he had only refined 36 of them. Once they were activated, they could resonate with his own cultivation method and cause wind and thunder to hurt the enemy. Just now, when he mentioned that he wanted to use this formation during the sword duel between the 16 sects, it was not empty words. He did have such a plan in mind. However, the Qingping Mist formation had not been refined to perfection, it was only roughly done. If there were 360 array peaks in this formation, its power would be enhanced to an unbelievable level, and it would not be a problem for it to fight 100 people. Zhang Yan laughed and replied, "Since senior brother Luo is interested, I will definitely keep you company." He stretched out his finger and in an instant, there was a thunderous sound. A purple light flashed, like a dancing snake, it tore through the sky and rushed towards Luo Qingyu. Luo Qingyu shouted and hurriedly activated his Dharma formula. The 36 banners fluttered and a stream of clear qi gathered on each of the banners and coiled around each other. In an instant, the wind and clouds converged, thunder and lightning intertwined and turned into streaks of clear qi that fell from the sky and collided with the purple lightning. In an instant, there was a deafening sound that shook the mountains in the formation. However, the purple heaven thunder was extremely powerful, it was indeed the second most powerful skill in Qinsang school. Even though Zhang Yan had only cultivated it to the initial level and was not very familiar with it, it was still extremely overbearing. Just now, when the green lightning met it, it collapsed. Luo Qingyu was slightly shocked and thought to himself, "Junior brother Zhang has not condensed his true seal yet, but the power of the purple heaven thunder is already so powerful. If he breaks through to core transformation stage 3, won't it be even more difficult to deal with? No wonder Master and Jinren Zhu wanted me to come here now." He smiled faintly and continued to activate the green lightning. On the surface, it seemed that Zhang Yan had the upper hand. However, the Qingji wind thunder was performed with the help of the formation map and Zhang Yan did not expend much of his energy. If he could not find a way to break the formation, under the endless thunder technique, even if Zhang Yan's core was of the first grade and he had a lot of energy, he would not be able to withstand such a great loss. Luo Qingyu was confident that as long as he practiced patiently, he would be able to win after a long time. Zhang Yan propped up the protective light on his treasured robe and released rays of light to resist the wind and thunder. He slowly looked around and saw clearly that the wind and thunder that Luo Qingyu had cast were all borrowed from the flags on the peaks. If he could remove them one by one, then the formation map would not have much power. After coming up with a countermeasure, he immediately raised his sword and turned into a ray of light. He cut through the air and cut through the qi. In an instant, he arrived at the top of one of the peaks. He circled in the sky and saw that there was a ball of wind and thunder protecting it. It was not something that could be broken by ordinary means. He then pointed his finger downwards and a ray of lightning shot down. With a loud bang, the flag was destroyed. Then, the sword ray turned and flew downwards. In just a moment, he had destroyed more than 10 flags. Luo Qingyu hid in the green wind and looked indifferent. He looked at Zhang Yan but did not stop him. If he wanted to break the formation, he would have to remove the flags one by one. However, the formation map was not ordinary. Not only was there a formation within a formation, there was also a magical weapon that was used to suppress it. This weapon was called the Kun Ding Pearl. Although it could not hurt the enemy, it could suppress the qi of the enemy and create a formation on its own. Every time a formation was broken, another one would appear behind it. Unless the person who broke the formation could destroy all the formations in one go, there was no way he could break the formation. If he did it step by step, he would die of exhaustion sooner or later. Zhang Yanlian's flight was swift, and after another moment, she had broken through the 36 peaks. However, at this moment, Luo Qingyu started to cast a spell. In the blink of an eye, another 36 flags appeared on top of the peaks, just like before. He smiled and put his hands behind his back. He said, "Junior brother Zhang, don't waste your energy. Let me give you a piece of advice. If you promise not to go to the floating heavenly palace to cultivate, I will open the formation door and let you out. I guarantee that no one else will know about what happened today. What do you think?" He waited for a while and heard a voice reply from within the lightning. "Senior brother Luo, you have underestimated me. Just now, I am just trying to prove what I have in mind. This is just a simple formation map, how hard can it be to break it?" Luo Qingyu shook his head. He thought that Zhang Yan was just being stubborn. However, since Zhang Yan refused to agree to his terms, there was no reason for him to give up. Luo Qingyu's expression turned cold. He continuously cast a spell to summon the wind and thunder. He thought to himself, when junior brother Zhang is exhausted, I will bring this formation map and place it on Jichuan Peak. After 10 days or half a month, I will let junior brother Zhang out. Let's see if he still has the face to go to the floating heavenly palace to cultivate. This formation map was a world of its own. It could easily trap a person for a few years. If Zhang Yan was trapped in it, although Luo Qingyu would not hurt him, once the news got out, how would he have the face to go to the floating heavenly palace again? Just when Luo Qingyu thought that victory was in his grasp, he saw dozens of red lights flying out from below. These things were of different sizes. Some were as small as a rice grain, while some were as big as a fish's eye. They looked familiar. When he realized what they were, he was shocked and shouted, "Red Thunder Bead? Oh no!" He wanted to keep the formation map, but it was too late. He heard a loud rumbling sound as if the sky and earth were collapsing. The scene in front of him changed and he was already outside the formation. Zhang Yan was standing not far away. He bowed to him and said, "Senior brother Luo, thank you for letting me win." Having said that, he waved his sleeves and brought Wei Zihong and his son over. He then floated away. Luo Qingyu stared at him as he left. He then looked at the formation map in his hand that was missing a corner. He could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. Chapter 424. After Zhang Yan got rid of Luo Qingyu, he continued to move forward. But before long, he saw another person blocking his way. This person had a strange appearance. He had 4 pupils in his eyes, a straight nose, and a square mouth. He wore a primeval crown with 2 wide sleeves. He stood on a thick cloud and his expression was indifferent. He was one of the top 10 disciples, Zhuang Bufan. Seeing this person, Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. He was not surprised. If Luo Qingyu could find an excuse to fight with him, then it was no surprise that Zhuang Bufan was here. He sneered and said, "Senior brother Zhuang, are you here to test me?" Zhuang Bufan said coldly, "I didn't expect junior brother Zhang to be able to pass junior brother Luo's test. You're quite capable. There is no need to say more. If you can pass my divine ability, I will turn around and leave. In the future, the floating heavenly palace will belong to you." As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Zhang Yan to reply. He stretched out his right sleeve and a yellow gas flew out from his sleeve. After it came out, it suddenly dispersed. In an instant, dust and sand were kicked up, the weather changed, and yellow smoke rolled up. Zhang Yan reacted quickly. Before the yellow smoke could reach him, the flying sword turned into a ray of light and flew out to protect him. However, when he was in the cloud, he found that the yellow smoke seemed to have covered the entire sky. He could not escape. Zhuang Bufan waved his sleeve and the yellow smoke rushed down. As soon as it touched his body, Zhang Yan felt an irresistible force grabbing him. His head felt heavy and his feet felt light. He was flipped upside down and his body was thrown into the sleeve involuntarily. Seeing that he was going to be trapped in the sleeve, he did not want to sit still and wait for his death. He quickly performed the incantation and shook his hand. A thunderous sound could be heard. Like a thunderclap on a dry day, a bolt of purple cloud divine thunder split the sky and landed on the thick cloud of yellow smoke. As expected, this divine ability had unparalleled might. With just a single strike, it scattered it. However, Zhuang Bufan seemed to have expected this. He sneered and immediately withdrew his right sleeve. Then, he waved his left sleeve. His sleeve shook in the wind and a drop of ink fell into water. They surged outwards without end, growing larger and larger. In the blink of an eye, they spread out for several li, like a curtain of dark clouds that covered the sky and covered the sun. When this Daluo heavenly sleeve was cultivated to the extreme, it could absorb 9 mountains. Grasping the 4 seas, moving the stars and shifting the moon. The previous attack was only to restrain Zhang Yan, preventing him from successfully escaping. This time, he truly made his move. As the cage came down, it immediately blocked all paths up and down. Zhang Yan was unable to escape and was instantly trapped in the circle. Seeing this, Zhang Yan sent out several bolts of purple heaven divine thunder in an attempt to shake it away, but even though the thunder rumbled. The rumbling resounded without end, yet it was like a stone that sank into the ocean and didn't give rise to any ripples. In but a short moment, his entire body was swept up by the muddy qi that covered the heavens and the earth, and he vanished into his sleeve. Zhuang Bufan remained expressionless. With a wave of his sleeves, he placed one hand behind his back and stepped onto the cloud, soaring into the sky. Even though Zhang Yan was trapped in his sleeve, his mind was still clear. He opened his eyes and looked around, only to find that he had fallen into a hazy world. Countless surging muddy qi wrapped around him like a cocoon, and even the spiritual energy in his body seemed to have been restrained. As he circulated his spiritual energy, he felt that it was difficult to control. If it was anyone else who fell into this state, they would have been at their wits' end. However, Zhang Yan had cultivated many divine arts, so it wasn't impossible for him to do so. He sneered coldly as a wisp of bright light erupted from his eyes. He circulated his profound art, and a strand of green and misty brilliance charged out from behind him. This strand of brilliance resisted the yellow smoke, and boundless vitality bloomed from within it. This vitality was like the awakening of all living things in spring, and it sprouted and flourished as it slowly pushed the yellow smoke outwards. When it was just about to be broken, he let out a thunderous shout and abruptly pushed outwards. A loud rumble resounded as he actually broke through the yellow smoke and broke free from it. After Zhuang Bufan put Zhang Yan away, he flew across the clouds and headed towards the gate. Suddenly, his arm shook and he was caught off guard, causing him to stumble on the cloud. Looking up, he saw Zhang Yan standing hundreds of feet away. Zhang Yan cupped his fists at him and said, "Senior brother Zhuang, thank you for sending me off. Goodbye." When he finished, he raised his sword and flew away with Madame Wei and her son. In an instant, they disappeared into the horizon. Zhuang Bufan wore a cold expression as he watched Huang Xiaolong disappear into the distance. There was nothing he could do. He snorted and turned around to leave. When Zhang Yan returned this time, no one stopped him anymore. Light soared into the sky, flying swiftly like a bolt of lightning as he smoothly arrived at clear nether heavenly lake. Before arriving at the cave residence, he dispersed the escape light on his body and first ordered Wei Zihong to take 2 pills to resist the cold air in the heavenly lake residence of bright nether heaven. After they dissolved the medicinal power, he rolled up his sleeves and brought the 2 of them to the main residence. After entering the 12 palaces, Zhang Yan sat down on the jade couch and called Wei Zihong over. He took out a bottle of pills and said, "Your mother has been bedridden for many years. This bottle of pills is called Qi Replenishing Powder. It can clear the blood in your body, relax the meridians, and get rid of impurities. Remember to give your mother one every morning and night. After 100 days, she will be able to walk like a normal person." Wei Zihong was pleasantly surprised. He knelt on the ground with tears of gratitude and said, "Master's kindness is something this disciple can't repay even if I die 10,000 times." Others didn't know where Wei Zihong's mother's paralysis came from, but Zhang Yan knew very well that Madame Wei must have been injured by the divine light from the 3 eyes on her forehead. However, with his medicinal pills to recuperate and protect her life, she wouldn't have to worry about it in the future. He then reminded, "Master will first pass on a technique to you. Once you've memorized it, go back and cultivate." Wei Zihong knelt down and kowtowed, saying yes. Zhang Yan flicked his finger and sent out a talisman. In just a moment, Lu Yenny arrived at the hall. She bowed and said, "Honored master has summoned this disciple. May I know what instructions you have for me?" Zhang Yan pointed at Lu Yenny and said to Wei Zihong, "This is your senior apprentice sister. If there is anything you don't understand in your cultivation, you can ask her." Wei Zihong hurriedly bowed respectfully to Lu Yenny and said loudly, "Zihong greets senior apprentice sister." Lu Yenny helped him up and said gently, "Junior apprentice brother, please rise. There are 5 senior apprentice sisters above you, so I will call you 6th junior apprentice brother. To be able to become a disciple of master is your good fortune. Cultivate well in the future and don't let down master's expectations." When Wei Zihong first entered the sect, he could only say yes in front of his senior apprentice sister. Lu Yenny saw that he was being reserved, so she smiled and didn't say anything else. Zhang Yan nodded. There were only a few disciples in the sect now. If he had the time, he would give a few pointers, but as his cultivation gradually increased, the number of disciples would increase as well. He wouldn't have to do everything himself. He would only let the disciples with higher cultivation in the sect do it for him. Now that he was the lower house chancellor, if he met a suitable disciple, he could send them to the lower house to cultivate. If they were really outstanding, they would definitely stand out from the crowd and it wouldn't be too late to teach them the true method. However, Wei Zihong was an exception. He was the one who would take over the Yaoyin clan's orthodoxy in the future, so there was no need to follow this path. After he opened his meridians, Zhang Yan would bring him to see the sect master and receive the 5 inherited treasures. Only then could he make specific arrangements for his cultivation. Zhang Yan gave some more instructions before ordering Shang Chang to bring Wei Zihong and his mother away and arrange a place for them to rest. He left Lu Yenny alone and said, "I don't want to go to the competition in 5 years. If senior apprentice brother Hua sends someone to ask, just say that I'm in closed-door meditation to comprehend magic. I'll be in closed-door meditation for a long time, so you need to guard the house and don't go out at will. Yenny, as the eldest disciple, you'll be in charge of everything in the house. If you can't make up your mind, you can discuss it with Luo Nyangzi. If necessary, you can ask Jinren Lu for help." Lu Yenny said solemnly, "Yes, I'll remember." After Zhang Yan gave his instructions, he ordered her to leave. He then picked up his brush and wrote 3 letters to Shouming Palace, Danding Courtyard, and the lower house of Kangwu Mountain. Now that the matters of the lower house had his new rules and the 3 deacons were in charge, there should be nothing to worry about. Moreover, he knew that he would spend a lot of time in closed-door meditation this time, so he needed to inform Jinren Peng and Zhou Chengju in advance. After dealing with a few matters, he was thinking about what he had missed out. Suddenly, a matter came to his mind and he could not help but shake his head. He thought to himself, "I almost forgot about this matter, but I need to inform them." When he opened his meridians that day, although he had the help of Beiju, he had asked a disciple from a small Han sect to borrow the jade elixir essence pool in order to cover it up. That year, he had promised that if there was an outstanding disciple in the sect for 260 years, he could bring him into his sect to cultivate. Today, he had taken in another disciple, so he also thought of this matter. However, if everything went smoothly during his closed-door meditation this time, he would need to go to the floating heavenly palace to cultivate and would not have time to care about this matter. If this Han disciple came looking for him, he could not break his promise. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he wrote a letter and sent it to Lu Mainyang. Today was a troubled time, so he tried not to let his disciples go out. This woman was Jinren Yuanying, so even if she left the house, it would not be a big deal. He could rest assured that she would handle this matter. After sending the letter, he sat silently for a moment, adjusted his heart and chi, and got up to go into the small mirror. After stepping into this world, he leaped into the air and sat down in the bamboo house. With a wave of his hand, 2 jade bottles flew out and placed in front of the couch, one on the left and one on the right. They were the metal and fire chi that Lu Yenny had found. Zhang Yan looked at them for a moment and pointed his finger. The jade bottle that contained the chi of Gung Xi and metal trembled and opened the bottle stopper. The sharp chi of gold that was originally curled up inside suddenly lost its suppression and could not stay there any longer. A ray of chi rushed straight up, as if it was going to break through the bamboo house. Unhurriedly, he opened his mouth and spat out a puff of smoke that was as white as snow. Immediately flew out and wrapped around the golden chi. No matter how it struggled, it could not escape. With a slight movement, he sucked in a wisp of it into his stomach. Then, he reached out his hand and the Dan Sha pressed down, suppressing the remaining chi of essence into the bottle. With a turn of his wrist, the bottle stopper popped out and was sealed again. The jade bottle shook a few times before it stopped moving. Among the chi of 5 elements, the chi of gold was sharp and the chi of fire was fierce. These two were the hardest to tame, especially the chi of gold, which was not easy to bind. During the refining process, if one was not careful, it would disappear without a trace. Fortunately, Zhang Yan had already cultivated 3 types of true light and was not a newbie. He was already familiar with this and easily tamed the chi of gold. Next, he only needed to follow the prescribed order and refine the chi of essence according to the method. Chapter 425. In the blink of an eye, 17 years had passed since Zhang Yan started his closed-door training. On this day, the sound of rolling stones was heard from the small pot mirror. It was like the beating of a drum in the sky. Zhang Yan sat cross-legged on the jade couch with his palms facing the sky while the vital energy on his body surged. The baleful chi in his body was like smoke that surged out and filled the entire bamboo building before dispersing outwards to cover this entire area of the heavens and the earth. But in the blink of an eye, his entire body seemed to be enveloped by thick clouds, and his figure could barely be discerned. Then, streams of brilliance flashed out from the thick mist and clouds. First, there was a gilded halo of light. In just a flash, it emitted a dense and sharp aura. It cut through the bamboo building and shot out 1,000 feet away. The sound of air tearing and the aura dragging, the cold light shone through the sky, and it only disappeared after a while. After the golden light faded away, a cluster of jade-green light appeared once more. It rose higher and higher until it pierced the clouds. Then, it spread out in all directions like a curtain. There were thousands of them, and they hung down to the ground before rolling up again. They were endless and full of vitality. The light flashed for a moment and then slowly disappeared. At this time, the sound of water was heard again. There was a blue light floating in the fog. It was like the surging tide, but also like the monstrous waves. It rushed and surged with great momentum. About an hour later, the rain stopped and the sky turned green. Under the clear sky, a red glow burst forth and a ball of flames burned fiercely like the rising sun. The bamboo building was touched by this fire and with a bang, it immediately turned into ashes, leaving only black ashes that filled the sky and scattered down. The fire jumped for a while and then stopped. What replaced it was a ball of thick yellow light. With a slight movement, a mound of earth was lifted up from the bamboo building. It was like a mound. In a moment, it rose to 1,000 feet high and was as majestic as a mountain. The 5 lights flashed one after another. It went back and forth for 100 times before it finally stopped. Zhang Yan pushed the Dan evil away and revealed himself. At this moment, his eyes were bright and his spirit was high. The robe on his body was fluttering. After this seclusion, he finally gathered all 5 elements' true light. It turned out that he used 14 years to deduce the 5 elements cultivation method, but it took him another 3 years to fuse them together. He used the remnant of the jade to deduce it repeatedly, and got rid of a lot of redundant and complicated details. Finally, he refined them into one, and became a mystical technique until today. He could move with his heart like he was moving his fingers. Once this technique was completed, his battle prowess increased greatly. Naturally, he was overjoyed. It was important to know that the 5 elements were complete. Once one's cultivation reached a deeper level, it would be able to derive all sorts of wonderful effects. It couldn't be compared to before. However, his Tai Xian 5 elements Xunfa was only a small success, and there were still many flaws. If he wanted to achieve great success and return to the ancient Tai Xian sect, there was still a long and bumpy road ahead of him. The grand competition of the 16 sects was almost over. There were 39 years left, and the next step was to condense the true seal of spiritual power. Zhang Yan was not in a hurry to cultivate. Instead, he cast a spell, and a water mirror appeared in front of him, reflecting all the disciples in the cave abode. The mirror spirit noticed his movement. It also came out, and waited by the side, quietly waiting for instructions. Zhang Yan looked for a moment. When he saw that everything was stable and there was no change, he was relieved. He waved his hand and summoned the mirror spirit. He said, "How many acupuncture points has Yeni burned?" The mirror spirit bowed and said, "Master, Lun Yangzi has burned 32 acupuncture points 10 years ago. Now he is in seclusion, and I don't know how much progress he has made. As for those 36 acupuncture points, it takes longer to burn them. I think he needs more time." Zhang Yan nodded with relief. If an ordinary disciple could burn more than 20 acupuncture points, he would not wait any longer and would condense the elixir into a pill. However, Lu Yeni still stopped at the acupuncture point. That was to stabilize the foundation, so that the grade of the pill would be higher in the future. After receiving his secret technique, he didn't know how far his eldest disciple could go. He himself had experienced this dangerous stage, and he knew that the step of condensing the elixir had to be very careful. If there was a slight mistake, there would be no turning back. He pondered for a while and felt that if he waited until he entered the 3rd stage of core transformation, then he would have a much higher chance of helping her condense the elixir. After thinking about it, he waved his hand and dismissed the mirror spirit. Then he reached into his sleeve and took out 2 jade boxes. Inside the boxes were the true seal talisman that Zhong Muqing and the sect leader gave him. In this true seal, there was a trace of the consciousness and essence of the senior master, who had already pointed out the path ahead. When the disciple wanted to condense the true seal, he only needed to follow the path of the senior and refine it step by step. There was no need to waste much effort. It could be said that if a cultivator obtained the sect's inheritance, it was not easy to cross this stage, but compared to the danger of melting medicine and condensing the elixir, it was much easier. However, Zhang Yan had condensed the 1st stage of the elixir. Whether or not he had a teacher to guide him, he had no predecessor's method to learn from. He thought to himself, to think that the 2 seniors in the sect did not have any method to learn from, but they were still able to force their way out. They are really amazing. Other than the founder of the Qinsang school, there were 2 other seniors who also condensed the 1st stage of the elixir. However, it was by chance, and it might not be as they wished to do it again. As for condensing the true seal, they had the help of a magic treasure left behind by the founder of the sect, so they did not leave any method of condensing the spiritual energy in this world. When the great change in the Qinsang school happened 100 years ago, this magic treasure was taken by the fierce person, so this path was considered to be cut off. Because it was rare to condense the first stage of the elixir since ancient times, not many people paid attention to it. Later on, when Zhang Yan condensed the first stage of the golden elixir, a few people in the sect who had experienced the change on that day thought about it just now, and they were faintly on guard, realizing that the fierce person might have done it on purpose that day. Although Zhang Yan did not have the help of a magic treasure, he had the remnant of the jade, so he was not afraid. Although he was full of confidence, when he did things, he was still extremely careful. To form the true seal, he had to first understand the profoundness of it. He took a deep breath, reached into his sleeve, and grabbed the remnant of the jade. His mind sank, and he began to deduce. What he was deducing now was not only the two true seals, but also the method of condensing the seal from the Luo Academy. There were more than 300 methods, and they were all left behind by the seniors in the Qinsang school. He was also very lucky that he joined the Qinsang school. After 10,000 years of accumulation, he had such a deep foundation. If it was a small sect, it would be good if he could find a few methods. But even so, most of these methods were inferior methods, and there were very few intermediate methods. There was not a single superior method. He just wanted to explore the theory and find out the differences and similarities. He did not want to use it as a reference, so there was not much difference between the good and the bad. Time slowly passed, and another 2 years passed in the small pot mirror. In the jade, Zhang Yan had deduced for close to 100 years. Apart from trying to condense the true seal that Zhong Muqing and sect leader Qin gave him, he also practiced the 300 methods to condense the true seal one by one. Just now, he stopped. At this moment, his understanding of the true seal was so deep that no one in this realm could compare to him. He understood why the true seal was condensed like that, what it was long and what it was short of. The dermic power true seal that Zhong Muqing had given him was ever-changing. If one used this method to condense the true seal, one would be much faster than normal people when cultivating abilities and techniques, and it would greatly increase one's combat strength. The true seal that the sect leader gave him all the branches, and only the main one was left. It could be said that there was only one path. Both of these techniques had their merits. Zhang Yan guessed that the person who left the true seal was someone who loved to fight. Just now he would walk this path. As for the sect leader's true seal, if he focused on cultivating and broke through, he would be far better than others. His future achievements would be immeasurable. However, that didn't mean that there were no fighting techniques within. It was just purely based on formations. Compared to the former, it was much lacking. The former focused on techniques, the latter focused on the Tao, so it was hard to say who was better and who was worse. At this moment, Zhang Yan had an idea of what path he should take. He wasn't prepared to copy the former, but to open up a new path. He straightened his body, his mind sinking into the jade once more. He started to practice what he was thinking about. However, this time, the time he spent was much longer than he had expected. Even with the hard work from before, he used a year, which was 40 years in the jade. He tried many times and went through many setbacks. Just now he was able to deduce a technique to condense the true seal. However, at this step, he faced something weird. Every time he used this method to condense the true seal, the result would be different. After carefully searching for the reason, he understood. He thought to himself, so, when condensing the true seal, even if there is a small difference, it will lead to a different result. There is no fixed method to follow. Since that was the case, he decided not to waste any more effort. He kept the jade and sat on the meditation mat, picking up the technique. The golden pellet under his stomach was guided, it shook and gathered all the vengeful energy in its body. It followed the method of condensing the true seal and started to revolve. In an instant, the golden core that seemed like glass emanated a 5-colored and brilliant light, and then an illusory and indeterminate true seal floated up from it. It was dazzling like rosy clouds, translucent, crystalline, and then shrouded in mist, and there were countless talismans, bird scripts, and erosive texts floating up into appearance. When the seal became more and more real, the talisman seal script became more and more clear and endless essence was born from it. Zhang Yan's spirit couldn't help but be excited. This essence qi was formed when condensing the true seal. If he could use it in time, he could greatly improve his cultivation method and abilities. After a core formation cultivator passed this stage, their strength would suddenly rise by a level. He knew that he had cultivated quite a few Dao techniques, but there were only a few that could truly defeat the enemy. The 5 elements true method was the foundation of his Dao cultivation, and it was the most important part. If he could improve on this Dao technique, that would be for the best. Because of this, without hesitation, he immediately channeled the spiritual qi into the technique and continued to push it up. This technique climbed step by step and its power also increased. When Zhang Yan almost suspected that this technique would swallow all the essence in one go, his body trembled. He found that if he continued to improve, the progress of this technique would be very slow. He controlled the momentum and no longer wasted essence on it. Instead, he tried to improve the Purple Heaven Thunder technique. This technique was indeed very powerful. Up until now, he had not seen anyone who could contend against it head-on. He had planned to strengthen this technique a long time ago. Zhang Yan's Dan had reached the 1st grade. The essence was boundless like the sea. When the Purple Heaven Thunder technique could no longer evolve, he found that there was still a lot left. He roughly estimated that the 5 elements true method had absorbed more than half of his essence qi, which was about 60%, while the Purple Cloud Godly Thunder had absorbed 20%, leaving 20%. If he didn't use up all of this essence qi when he condensed the true seal today, it would slowly dissipate after the seal was formed. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to choose the Billowing Cloud technique, the mysterious yellow dragon capturing hand, and the True Freedom technique, respectively, and poured his essence qi into them. After an unknown amount of time, when the essence was used up, the true seal that was originally uncertain suddenly shook and condensed into a solid form. It then fell into the golden Dan and disappeared. At this moment, he was in a trance. When he woke up, he suddenly stood up and circulated his Xian technique. He couldn't help but laugh. At this moment, he had already condensed the true seal and entered the 3rd grade of the core transformation realm. Chapter 426. Zhang Yan achieved the core transformation stage 3 in one fell swoop. At his level of cultivation, he was only 1 step away from the Yuanying state. Although it was only a short step, it was like 1,000 mountains and 1,000 rivers. He needed to put in a lot of effort and practice before he could succeed. At this moment, he did not end his cultivation but pondered if he should take another step forward. After the cultivators of the Xianmen sect condensed their mana and true seal, it was considered a success. However, it was different for the cultivators of the devil doctrine. They still needed to work hard, and that was to brand the true seal into their spirit. In this way, just like Tai Heng Laosher, even if his physical body was destroyed, he could just change to another body. He did not need to cultivate all the spells that he had practiced in his life from the beginning. He just needed to cultivate it a little more before he could use it. Although Zhang Yan did not think that he would abandon his physical body, the path of cultivation was dangerous and no one knew what would happen in the future. Moreover, the 1,000-year devil calamity was just around the corner. It was always good to be prepared. Now that his origin spirit was powerful enough to bear the weight of this seal, and he also had the complete soul contract, it wasn't difficult for him to do this. Therefore, he deliberately used about 3 days to refine the true seal into one and brand it into his spirit. Only then could he be considered to have completed his cultivation. He carefully examined himself and felt that the spiritual opportunity in his body was abundant. All his skills had improved. Especially the Tai Xian 5 Elements True technique, it really saved him many years of hard work. Apart from the unimportant ones, only the minor universe-shifting escape technique did not receive the help of the essence. However, this was his intention. This small supernatural power was evolved from the 5 Elements True technique by the seniors of the Qinsang school. And it was a supreme skill of protection and concealment. However, the 5 elements chi was difficult to pass. Now that he had the 5 elements true technique as his foundation, he would not need to put in so much effort to cultivate it in the future. Moreover, the sword competition between the 16 sects was approaching and there was not much time left. Therefore, he did not deliberately cultivate it. Zhang Yan stopped practicing and stood up, exiting the small kettle realm. Sitting in the main hall, he summoned the mirror spirit and asked, "In the past few years, have the disciples been diligent in their cultivation?" The mirror spirit replied respectfully, "Master has ordered all the disciples to sit in the mansion and cultivate diligently." Zhang Yan nodded and asked a few more questions. Only then did he realize that Lu Yenni's cultivation had been progressing very quickly these past few years. The 34th meridian was about to be broken through, and it would only take a month or so for him to succeed. He thought for a while and said, "The sect leader once promised me that once my cultivation base reaches the 3rd tier of the core transformation realm, I can use the floating heavenly palace to cultivate for 30 years. After I leave, if Yen Yi comes out of seclusion, tell her to send a letter to me, I will come back and help her refine the medicine and condense the pill." The 30-year deadline was approaching. Time was running out. After the mirror spirit left, Zhang Yan left for the floating heavenly palace. With the help of the sword, he flew at a godly speed. In a short while, he arrived at the heavenly palace and unfolded the talisman. He landed in front of the side hall that he had come to before and told the Taoist boy about his intentions. He only waited for a while in front of the door before calling him in. In the inner hall, sect leader Qin sized him up, waved his horsetail whisk, and said, "Zhang Yan, stand aside first. If something happens later, don't say anything." Zhang Yan felt strange, but he was very shrewd, so he didn't show it on his face. He obeyed and stood in front of the hall. Sect leader Qin didn't say anything. After a while, a middle-aged Taoist entered the main hall. This person wore a moon-white Taoist robe and a 9-sun crown. His eyes were reserved, and his sideburns were slightly white. He was tall, almost as tall as Zhang Yan. At first glance, Zhang Yan felt that this person was very ordinary. However, when he took another look, his eyes narrowed. This person was clearly standing there, but he gave off a mysterious feeling that he was illusory, real, and fake. It was as if he could disappear from the world at any time, leaving no dust behind. When sect leader Qin saw this person, he didn't sit anymore. He stood up and said in a deep voice, "Uncle Master Zhua, greetings." Elder Zhua stood with his hands behind his back and said plainly, "I'm not worthy of your greeting, perfected sect leader. I'm here for one thing, and I'll leave after I'm done." Sect leader Qin's expression turned serious, and he said, "Uncle Master, please speak." Zhang Yan now knew that this Taoist was the Grand Supreme Elder of the Hall of Duzhen. He couldn't help but look at him a few more times. Elder Zhua Daoren said, "Perfected sect leader, it's against the rules for the floating heavenly palace to be used by our disciples to cultivate. I hope that sect leader will not make such an exception." Sect leader Qin's expression didn't change, and he said, "I've already promised my juniors. Since I've said it, how can I go back on my word?" Elder Zhua didn't say much. He shook his hand and a golden talisman flew over. He said, "I know that perfected sect leader is in a difficult position." Before senior apprentice brother ascended, he left behind a decree. "With this, can you take back your order?" Sect leader Qin took the talisman and looked at it. He sighed softly and said, "With master's decree, how can I not obey?" Elder Zhua didn't say anything else. After he cupped his hands in greeting, he waved his sleeves and didn't stay any longer. He turned around and left in a flash. From beginning to end, he didn't say a single word to Zhang Yan. He didn't even look in his direction. Sect leader Qin sat down again. He pondered for a while, then he raised his head and looked at Zhang Yan. He said, "Zhang Yan, I'm afraid I can't use the floating heavenly palace for your cultivation anymore." Zhang Yan smiled and said in a clear voice, "There are tens of thousands of paths, and there's more than one path. I'm just looking for another way." Sect leader Qin stroked his beard and smiled. His eyes flashed, and he said, "You don't have to rush. I have a way to help you cultivate Yuanying as soon as possible." Zhang Yan's spirit was lifted, and a look of concentration appeared on his face. Sect leader Qin raised his horsetail whisk and pointed outside. He said, 180,000 miles to the west of the East Flower Continent is the Central Pillar Continent. There's a boundary there called Kunyu, which leads directly to the Jiutian realm. There's a strange chi there called the Green Sun Hero. It's rare and difficult to collect. Even if a Yuanying cultivator obtains it, it can increase their cultivation. However, with your current cultivation, you can't go there yet. Today, I'll lend you a talisman that can help you absorb this chi. The world was divided into 9 continents. There was a saying, 3 continents in the east, 3 in the west, 1 in the south, and 1 in the north, and 1 in the pillar. This pillar referred to the Central Pillar Continent. This place was the ancestral vein of the 9 continents and the source of the 4 seas. Sect leader Qin flipped his palm, and a bamboo-shaped fish drum that looked like it was carved from black jade flew out. When it landed in his palm, he said, "This item is called the Hero's Not Fish Drum. It can condense energy into jade." Back then, Yuntian also received its help. However, the true spirit of this treasure has a strange temperament. Whether you can use it or not will depend on yourself. As soon as he finished speaking, a young Taoist wearing an elegant crown and a broad robe walked out. He raised his head and shouted. He said, "Qin Mabai, are you willing to let me out?" Zhang Yan took a glance at him and saw that he was quite handsome. However, his actions and tone seemed a little carefree and unrestrained. Sect leader Qin smiled and didn't say anything. He just pointed at Zhang Yan and said, "You can go with him." The young Taoist looked at Zhang Yan and said casually, "Are you the one who wants to collect energy?" "I'll say this first. I don't have any fighting skills. If we fight with others, don't count on me." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I don't dare to trouble Taoist brother." The young Taoist said loudly, "If you want me to help, then you have to give me good wine. I won't do a losing deal." Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. He looked at sect leader Qin. He saw that sect leader Qin had his eyes closed and didn't say anything. He allowed the two of them to discuss and didn't seem to want to interfere. He thought for a moment and took out a wine pouch from his sleeve and handed it over. The young Taoist took it. He removed the stopper in front of sect leader Qin and sniffed it. Instantly, his face was filled with joy and he said, "Good wine, good wine." He raised his head and drank a few mouthfuls. His eyes shone brightly and he wanted to drink more. However, he thought about it and held the wine pouch close to his chest. He asked, "Do you have more?" Zhang Yan shook his head and said, "This wine isn't easy to brew. I'll find more for Taoist brother." This wine was originally the young returning wine that Elder Gong had given him. He still had more, but he didn't give it away anymore. This was to whet the true spirit's appetite. If he obtained it too easily, it wouldn't cherish it. The young Taoist's face was filled with resentment and he muttered, "Not straightforward." Although he said this, his body turned into a ray of clear light and entered the fish drum. Then, the item automatically flew up and landed in Zhang Yan's direction. Zhang Yan stretched out his hand and caught the treasure, putting it into his sleeve. Sect leader Qin opened his eyes and said in a low voice, "Zhang Yan, when you go, you need to be careful of that fierce person." That day, there was a huge change in the sect. He either lured or tricked us and stole many of our talismans. This heroic section fish drum was one step ahead of me and I managed to stop him. Although his 1,000 years of cultivation had been broken by the North Dark Sword and he must be recuperating somewhere, his disciples are quite capable and might try to rob it. You need to be careful. Zhang Yan's heart trembled. He bowed and said, "Thank you, sect leader, for your advice." Sect leader Qin waved his horsetail whisk and said, "Go." Zhang Yan bowed again and left the floating sky palace. On the way back, he thought about the words and actions of sect leader Qin just now. They all seemed to have a deeper meaning. He couldn't help but think to himself, Elder Zhuo coming out to stop him was probably within sect leader's spiritual master's expectations. He guessed that the matter of sect leader's spiritual master borrowing his floating sky palace was purposely leaked out. The person who did it was probably Elder Zhuo. As for the specific reason, he couldn't think of it. But speaking of which, he obtained a true treasure and didn't suffer a loss. His cultivation level was still low and he couldn't participate in this kind of chess game, so there was no point in thinking too much about it. Thus, he only thought about it twice before he dismissed it with a smile. He activated his Fa Li and like a bolt of lightning, he headed back to the cave. At the same time, on a peak in the Great Lake of Dragon Lake, there were two people standing together. One of them was sect leader Qin and the other was Elder Zhuo. Martial nephew Qin, I've asked for senior brother's decree today, and it can be considered that I've settled one of my worries. I'll be going into closed-door cultivation in a few days, and after I leave, no one will be able to restrain Mabai anymore. Sect leader Qin was shocked and said, Martial uncle, don't tell me you want to. The handsome Taoist put his hands behind his back and looked at the void. He said, back then, I could already break the world and leave. The reason why I stayed here for more than 100 years was because senior brother thought that my martial nephew Mabai was planning something big. If he obtained the position of sect leader, he might take that step. At that time, our Qinsang school would be doomed. So, he wanted me to hold the talisman and watch from the side so that I could stop him at the crucial moment. It's just that recently, I have a feeling that if I continue to wait, I'm afraid that I won't have the chance to ascend anymore. Whether I succeed or fail, it's all up to fate. As someone who is about to leave, I won't care about you guys anymore. Sect leader Qin was a little frustrated. She didn't know about the talisman. If she knew about it, she would have planned it carefully. Why would she ask this martial uncle to help her in such a hurry? In her father's generation, Qinsang school was already at its peak. There were at least 3 people in the sect who had the potential to break the world and ascend. For a time, its reputation was immeasurable. Even Shaoqing sect was overshadowed. Not only that, there were even a few extraordinary people among the younger generation. But for some reason, her father didn't say who would inherit the position of sect leader and ascended. After he left, a few disciples under him got into a dispute. It went on for dozens of years, but there was still no sect leader. At that time, the current sect leader, Qin Mabai, was ranked last. All the senior brothers fought for the position, but he didn't say anything. So, no one thought highly of him. But in the end, he used brilliant methods and allied with the aristocratic families to suppress the few senior brothers. If he didn't imprison them, he would expel them and seize the position of sect leader. After going through this huge change in the sect, Qinsang school's strength was also greatly reduced. Even the land of 3 pools that was close to them was lost. And now, the master and disciple faction regained control of the situation. Not only did they regain the 3 pools, but a small half of the Grotto Heaven's spiritual masters in the sect came from this sect leader. The only one who could restrain him was this Elder Zhuo. Sect leader Qin thought about it repeatedly. She believed that sect leader's senior brother should have known about the talisman long ago, so he used the matter of Zhang Yan to lure her to invite this martial uncle. And Elder Zhuo had long wanted to leave. It was just that he couldn't leave because of the promise he made in the past. Now that she had invited him, he could take advantage of the situation and end this matter. Once this elder left, there would be no one to suppress sect leader Qin. Thinking of this, sect leader Qin couldn't help but grit her teeth and said, "Senior brother, you really are a good schemer." Chapter 427. When Zhang Yan returned to Zhaoyu Heavenly Lake, it was already afternoon. Seeing that he returned so quickly, the mirror spirit was a little puzzled, but seeing that there was no emotion on his face, she didn't dare to ask more. She just came up to him obediently and asked if there was anything for him to do. Zhang Yan only said, "If Yenny comes out, quickly report to me." Then, he flicked his sleeves and stepped into the small pot mirror. At this moment, he had already thought it through. He only needed to wait for his eldest disciple to come out of seclusion and help him condense his core. Then, he would go to Middle Pillar Divine Continent to collect Green Yang Gang Qi and see if he could step into Yuanying state within 30 years. The bamboo building in the small pot mirror was destroyed by his fire elemental true light earlier. However, this world had formed its own heaven and earth and could transform into all kinds of things. With just a thought, this building was pulled up from the air again and was still standing in the middle of the bamboo forest. He stepped into the air and entered the building in a blink of an eye. Then, he sat on the couch and with a thought, a series of mysterious spells appeared in front of him. This was the supernatural power of the 5 elements escape method. He didn't have time to cultivate it previously, so now he could study it. He reached into his sleeves and held the jade remnant, his mind sinking into it as usual. After an unknown period of time, on this day, the mirror spirit came to report, "Master, Lun Yangzi came out of seclusion and is waiting outside." Zhang Yan withdrew his mind from the jade remnant, opened his eyes and said, "Call her in." After a while, Lu Yenny entered the mirror. Today, she had changed into a white robe and used a soft silver rope to tie her fine black hair. Her jade-like bones and ice-like skin were revealed, and her beautiful eyes were bright and clear. She was elegant and pure, like a white lotus. Her cultivation seemed to be even purer than before. She came in front of Zhang Yan. She bowed gracefully and said, "Disciple greets teacher." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Yenny, no need to stand on ceremony, stand up and talk." Lu Yenny made a sound and bowed again before standing up. Zhang Yan looked at her again, nodded and asked, "How many acupoints have you opened now?" Lu Yenny replied, "Your disciple is slow-witted and has failed to live up to master's expectations. So far, I have only opened 34 points." Even with the incantation given by Zhang Yan, she still felt that it was extremely difficult towards the end. Especially the last 3 acupoints, they were extremely difficult to open. No matter how hard she tried, it was still difficult to break through them. Being able to open 34 acupoints was already extremely lucky. The moment the acupoints were opened, she had a vague feeling of enlightenment. He could only stop here. He didn't want to waste any more time and immediately cut off his obsession, ending his seclusion. Zhang Yan comforted her, "Disciple, it's not easy for you to cultivate to this stage. Don't belittle yourself. Do you want to try again?" Lu Yenny took a deep breath and shook her head. "No, disciple can sense that the time to condense the core has come, and I don't want to miss it." When a cultivator's cultivation reached a certain level, she would be able to sense the qi activity that was connected to her own fortune and misfortune. Sometimes, it was just a very small thought, and it would be over after a moment of carelessness. Only those who were born with a deep foundation and extraordinary temperament could be as calm as Lu Yenny. Only then could she do it. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. He said to the mirror spirit beside him, "Go and invite spiritual master Lu to the main hall." After the mirror spirit bowed, she accepted the order and left. Zhang Yan waved his sleeve again. Lu Yenny only felt the scene in front of her changed, and she found that she had been brought to the main hall. After a while, Lu Mainyang arrived. She bowed and said, "I greet Manor Master, may I know why you summoned I?" Zhang Yan got up and returned the greeting. "Today, I called you here because I want to invite you to God Crossing Peak." Lu Mainyang immediately understood what Zhang Yan meant. He wanted her to go and get the Chuejue Thunder, and the Zhangyan Marrow. After obtaining these 2 items, she must condense the core within 10 days. Otherwise, the thunder aura would disperse. Thus, she needed to go and get it before condensing the core. Just now. However, there was a deeper meaning in asking her to go and get it. She naturally understood it. She said cheerfully, "Since fellow Daoist Zhang has ordered, I will help. I will go now." After she finished speaking, she cupped her hands and walked out of the mansion with a gust of astral wind. These 2 medicines were actually not rare. For example, big sects like Qinsang School also had a lone peak north of Longyan Marsh to attract demonic birds to bathe in thunder. However, In the current world, the ones produced by Shinto Peak were still the best. Zhang Yan had high hopes for Lu Yeni. There was no room for failure. Thus, the quality of these two medicines was extremely demanding. Lu Mainyang was a Yuanying spiritual master. She came and went quickly. In less than 5 days, she had to return. When she arrived at the hall and saw Zhang Yan, she raised her finger and made a cut on her wrist. She forced out a few drops of blood essence. She took out a jade bottle and dripped them into it. Then, she took out a golden plate and handed it to Zhang Yan. This blood essence was formed from her bathing in thunder. Especially since she was also a bird, it was far better than the refined marrow in the bones of ordinary demonic birds. The Chuajue thunder in the golden plate was personally drawn by her. These two medicines were much better than what Zhang Yan found in the past. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeves and brought Lu Yeni back into the small pot mirror. He handed the jade bottle and the golden plate to her and said in a deep voice, "Disciple, since you have already sensed it, there is no time to lose. You can now turn the medicine into a pill. I will personally protect you." Lu Yeni's expression turned solemn and said, "Yes, master." She sat down slowly. She held her breath and adjusted her qi. After only half a day, her expression was calm and peaceful. Her state of mind was stable. Zhang Yan nodded. His lips moved and he told her the key points to condense the pill. With his guidance and protection, Lu Yeni's process of condensing the pill was very smooth. She did not make a single mistake. After 12 hours, she felt a surge of spiritual qi rushing to her head. Her blood qi was agitated. Her delicate face had an additional red color, like a red branch moistened by rain. There was a surge of qi in her chest. She opened her mouth slightly and wanted to let out a long cry. Then, she heard Zhang Yan's voice beside her ear, "Yeni, quickly restrain your spiritual qi." Lu Yan did as she was told, and it took a while for her to return to normal. At this time, she opened her eyes and looked down. Inside her body, she saw a golden core shining with a bright golden light. Clear qi circulated around it, and it was as if clouds were rising, shining brilliantly. After cultivating for so many years, she had finally condensed the pill. She could not help but be immersed in joy. After a while, she came back to her senses and knelt to Zhang Yan and said, "Thank you, master, for protecting me." Zhang Yan shook his head and smiled, "What a pity. You're only one step away from becoming a first-grade pill like me." He was originally thinking if he would be able to assist this disciple to ascend to the peak by providing guidance. But unfortunately, it seemed like the will of the heavens had obstructed him since a long time ago, and he was still slightly lacking in the end and was unable to attain a perfect state. Lu Yeni kowtowed again and said, "Disciple is already satisfied. I don't dare to ask for more." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "That's good too. There is no need to blindly follow behind me." He had condensed a first-grade pill. The path ahead was opened by himself. Although it was suitable for him, it might not be suitable for his disciple. There was no lack of people who had condensed a second-grade pill in Qinsang school. There were many techniques of the predecessors that could be used for reference. To Lu Yeni, this might be a good thing. Zhang Yan pondered for a while and said, "Disciple, now that you have condensed your pill, this cave abode will be left to you to manage. Master will make a trip to Central Pillar Divine Continent to find a chance to break through." Lu Yeni lowered her head and said, "Disciple's cultivation is shallow and cannot accompany you. I can only wish Master a smooth journey." Zhang Yan was about to say something when he suddenly sensed something. He immediately rose and left clear nether heavenly lake in an instant. He raised his head and looked towards the horizon. He saw a strange scene. There were shocking divine essence qi piercing through the 9 heavens and straight into the clouds. The momentum was magnificent and could be said to be incomparably magnificent. Such a phenomenon could be seen even from tens of thousands of li away. Almost at the same time. In the Donghua continent, whether it was the 10 great mystic sects or the 6 great demon sects, all cultivators sensed it. The 10 grotto heavens of the sect were all sitting in the cave abode. Some had complicated expressions, some were silent, some were deep in thought, and some were full of energy. Ever since Qinsang school became independent, apart from the sect master and ancestral master, the number of people who had ascended could be counted on one hand. Now, there was going to be one more. They were also extremely disappointed. This elder Zhua had taken care of them, the juniors. Back then, with this person and the previous sect master overseeing the Azure Sea, the two of them had looked down on the world and looked down upon all. Several hundred years ago, even the Shaoqing sect had no one who could compare to them, but now, they had both ascended. Not only them, but all the disciples of Qinsang school also sensed this change. At this moment, Qi Yuntian, who was sitting in the Xianshui True Palace, suddenly opened his eyes. He thought for a while and then went back to meditation. Hu Xian walked out of the cave abode in the 10 Peaks mountain and looked up at the sky. His eyes were bright, and no one knew what he was thinking. Thousands of miles away, Ning Chongxian, dressed in a green robe, stood on a lonely peak. His sleeves fluttered in the wind. He looked at the void with a cold expression. A magic sword beside him made a soft sound, as if it would fly away at any time. In the glittering grotto heaven, Immortal Qin let out a long sigh. Zhong Muqing said softly, "Immortal, Hall Master Zhua has ascended. This is great news." Immortal Qin shook his head and did not say anything. At this moment, a girl suddenly came to report and said, "Immortal, there is someone outside the cave abode asking to see you. He said an old friend is visiting." "Old friend?" Immortal Qin frowned. Then, she changed her mind and suddenly looked surprised. She said, "Invite him in." After a while, a young man in a coarse shirt, a bamboo hat, and a pair of straw shoes walked in. His face was like a full moon, and his eyes were bright. After entering the cave abode, he bowed to Immortal Qin and said, "Senior sister, it's been a long time." Zhong Muqing did not recognize this person, but when she heard him call Immortal Qin, "Senior sister," she was secretly surprised and secretly guessed his identity. Immortal Qin looked at him and was overjoyed. "Junior brother Shen, it's really you. When did you come back?" The young man smiled and said, "Just now for an hour." Master just now said a few words before he ascended. Immortal Qin could not help but sigh. Junior brother Shen looked at her and said, "Before Master ascended, he asked me to tell you that things are different now. If you can let go, then let go." Immortal Qin forced a smile and sighed. "But I can't let go just because you say so." Junior brother Shen shrugged and said, "I'm just passing on Master's words. As for what senior sister thinks, I can't." Immortal Qin laughed. "Junior brother, you still have such a temper. I wonder where you have been all these years." Junior brother Shen was Elder Zhua's direct disciple. It was just that he traveled outside all year round. He had cultivated for more than 700 years, but the time he stayed in the sect was less than a year. Junior brother Shen smiled and said, "For the matter of the 3 great tribulations, I followed Master's orders and crossed the ocean to travel to the Dongshan continent. I explored the geography and looked for opportunities along the way." Immortal Qin became interested and said, "Oh? How is that place compared to the Donghua continent?" Junior brother Shen shook his head and said, "It's far from the Donghua continent. Don't look at the hundreds of sects, but at most there are 5 that can be compared to the 16 sections. However, this is also because there are very few spirit eyes there." Immortal Qin looked at him and knew that he was still in the Yuanying realm. He could not help but feel a little pity and said, "Junior brother, your talent is extremely high. Why are you still in the Yuanying realm?" Junior brother Shen smiled and said lightly, "I'll leave it to fate." Immortal Qin looked at his confident look and thought that he seemed to have something to rely on. She remembered that he had seen Elder Zhua just now and thought of something, but she did not point it out. Her expression instantly relaxed a little, and her beautiful eyes flashed. She said, "Junior brother, although Uncle Master has left, with you coming back to help me, I won't be alone anymore." To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 428. Zhang Yan used an hour to pack up. Then, he brought Mountain River Child out of the cave abode. He would not be able to return for 20 to 30 years. Under the lead of Lu Yenny, his disciples came out to send him off. After giving some instructions, he rode a cloud and flew towards the west. The middle pillar divine continent was located among the 9 continents. Other than the local sects, many cultivators from other continents came and went here. Among them, the vagrant cultivators of the unorthodox sects were the most. They even formed alliances and helped each other. But no matter which one it was, they were 1,000 times more wary of the cultivators from the big sects from other continents. This was because this place was different from other places. It was rich in resources, and there were as many objects for cultivation as the stars in the sky. There were many cave abodes and temples left by the ancient cultivators, but there were very few spiritual caves. Big sects like the 3 big sects of Donghua never had one. Only a few sects like the Li Mountain sect had one. They understood the logic of a man's wealth getting him into trouble. If it was a vagrant cultivator, it would be fine. But if the disciples of the big sects of Xianmen had ill intentions and attracted the powerful cultivators of their own sects, they would probably invade their interests. Although Zhang Yan had no intention of getting into conflict with the sects of this continent, according to Mountain River Child, Kunyu was not a place without a master hundreds of years ago. There would probably be some twists and turns. He traveled for more than a month and a deep abyss appeared in front of him. A wide river lay in front of him, rushing below. From time to time, there would be waves that were dozens of feet high. White foam splattered and ice beads danced. It was a spectacular sight. This river was called the Time River. It was the boundary between 2 continents. After crossing this river, it would be where the middle pillar divine continent was. He looked ahead. He saw a towering shadow in front of him. It was shaped like a wall, towering into the clouds, but it was continuous like a wall. From north to south, it stretched to the end of the horizon. Although Zhang Yan had seen many descriptions of this continent in geography books, he was still amazed when he saw such a magnificent scene with his own eyes. The weather above the Time River was unpredictable. Suddenly, there was the sound of thunder. The torrential rain poured down, and suddenly the clouds parted, the sky was clear for 10,000 li. There were still dragons swimming and playing in the river, and the danger here was not much inferior to the open sea. To avoid trouble, Zhang Yan summoned the Qi Dragon ship and flew across the sea. This time, he was going to the Middle Pillar region alone. To avoid any accidents, he had brought his Flying Star Wheel Palace as well. However, this item was too ostentatious. Now that he had left the Donghua continent, he was not willing to use it unless it was a critical moment. He used his fiendish core to control his qi and fly. However, his speed wasn't slow either. He flew day and night, and in less than 20 days, he crossed the river and arrived at the border of the Central Pillar State. However, because this continent was higher than the other 8 continents, he still needed to go to the cloud sky. After flying upward for about 9 days, he still couldn't see the end of the road. According to what the Mountain River Child had said, the Central Pillar continent was a sky-piercing pillar that faced the East Flower continent. The peak of the pillar led to the top of the sky, and it was surrounded by stellar energy. He needed to find a path to enter the belly of the mountain before he could find the path to the center of the continent. However, several hundred years had passed since the last time the Mountain River Child had come here. The landscape of the mountains and rivers had changed a lot. Zhang Yan searched for a long time, but he still couldn't find the way. At this moment, his sleeve shook, and the fish drum true spirit came out. He sniffed around and took a deep breath. In the end, he showed an intoxicated expression and said, "Good wine, good wine." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "There's no one here, so where can I find good wine?" The fish drum true spirit pointed at his nose and said, "Martial nephew Zhang, you don't know that this treasure of mine can smell good wine even from 1,000 li away." He grabbed Zhang Yan's sleeve and said, "If we don't go quickly, we might miss it. Zhang Yan saw the fish drum true spirit scratching his ears and cheeks, looking like he couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't help but find it funny and said, "It won't take up much time anyway, I'll do as you say." The fish drum true spirit immediately beamed with joy. It pointed to the heavens and swore that it would gather more stellar energy for him and so on. Zhang Yan shook his head with a smile and waved his sleeve. He had said this a dozen times along the way, and he could only hope that the fish drum true spirit would really work hard. The fish drum true spirit was overjoyed after receiving his promise. He immediately turned into a light and flew away. After traveling for 100 li, he saw a caravan in front of him. There were more than 300 horses and more than 50 carriages, and they were moving forward on the steep mountain path that was like a long snake. He cried out in joy and jumped onto the carriage. With a wave of his hand, a jar of good wine that was tied up flew into his hand automatically. He removed the clay seal and took a deep breath before pouring it into his mouth impatiently. Among the caravan, a man who looked like a steward suddenly saw a young Taoist with disheveled hair appear in front of him. He actually snatched the good wine that his family needed to offer to the Tao Palace and was even drinking it as if there was no one else around him. He was instantly enraged and shouted, "Where did this wild Taoist come from? What are you waiting for? Hurry up and take him down." He didn't see where the fish drum true spirit appeared from, but there were some youths in the mountains who liked to climb the walls and steal goods by swinging down vines. This was a common occurrence, so he didn't think too much about it and immediately ordered his men to take action. Those servants and guards were all very experienced. There were 3 to 5 of them at the front, holding long rods and randomly poking at the fish drum true spirit. One of them took out a rope and waited for the fish drum true spirit to be chased down so that he could be tied up. Behind them, there were even a few youths who were rubbing their palms together excitedly. They were ready to kiss Xia Ho and treat him well. However, when the rods passed over, they actually passed through the fish drum true spirit's body as if they were illusions and couldn't touch his body at all. Everyone was shocked and someone exclaimed, "Could it be that we've seen a ghost in broad daylight?" That steward was rather knowledgeable and immediately felt that something was wrong. He pulled a manservant over and said a few words before stopping the crowd. He went forward and cupped his hands, saying, "I wonder which temple this Taoist is cultivating in. My master's surname is Wang and he has some friendly relations with the King Song residents." The fish drum true spirit only cared about drinking a jar of wine first and patted his shriveled belly that didn't change at all. He said with a mischievous smile, "I don't know who this King Song is. If you want wine money, just look for him." He stretched out his hand and pointed. Everyone turned around and saw that a handsome young Taoist had appeared beside them. Beside him was a delicate and pretty Taoist child. The Taoist had an extraordinary bearing and gave off an indescribable pressure just by standing there. That steward unconsciously took a step back. He was a little bewildered. Zhang Yan took out a jade box from his sleeve and passed it to Mountain River Child at the side. The latter went forward and passed the box to the steward, saying, "My master said that this item is to be used as payment for the wine." The steward saw that these 3 people had come in a strange manner and seemed to have some Taoist techniques in their hands, so he didn't dare to accept it easily. Just as he was hesitating, someone said from afar, "What's the value of some wine? It's my honor that Celestial Master is willing to give me face." Zhang Yan looked toward the source of the voice and saw a woman about 27 or 28 years old walking over. Her facial features were exquisite and her eyes revealed some experience and shrewdness. She was wearing a pink cloak and when she came over, everyone made way for her. It was obvious that she had a high status in the caravan. When the woman arrived in front of them, she said with a smile, "We are all citizens of Song. This trip is to deliver goods to the capital, and there is only one path that leads into the mountain within 1,000 miles. If the 2 Taoists don't mind, why don't you follow the caravan into the mountain? If we encounter any mountain spirits or monsters, I hope that you can protect us." She stretched out her slender finger. She pointed at the jars of wine and said, "If the 2 of you agree, I can offer all these wines." In this mountain, there were many monsters and monsters. When the caravan traveled, it was extremely dangerous. When the caravan traveled, those with a deep foundation would usually hire Taoists from the Tao Palace to protect them, but the price was quite high. There were also some Taoists who would specially wait by the roadside when they were traveling, eating from the caravan while appearing to block disasters for the caravan. It was obvious that this woman treated Zhang Yan and Yu Gu as such Taoists. Yu Gu's eyes lit up. Then, it looked at Zhang Yan eagerly and said, "Martial nephew Zhang, there's good wine here." Why not, Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. If he had to find a way into the mountain and blend in with these caravans, he could avoid a lot of accidents. He could agree, so he nodded slowly. Yu Gu was overjoyed. He winked at the woman and said, "How should I address you, little lady? Are you betrothed to me?" Everyone heard the teasing in his words and glared at him. The woman didn't mind it at all. She smiled and said, "My husband's surname is Wang, the two Taoists can just call me Wang." She waved her hand and called the steward over. "Prepare 2 good carriages for the 2 Taoists, don't neglect them." The steward quickly acknowledged. Madame Wang then said to Zhang Yan and Yu Gu with a smile, "If the 2 Taoists need anything, just call Steward Xiu. I'll take my leave for now." After saying that, she bowed and turned around to leave. When Madame Wang returned to her carriage, she saw a white-haired steward leaning on a crutch waiting there. When he saw her, he walked over shakily and bowed. "Madam." Madame Wang supported him and frowned. "The mountain road is dangerous. Steward Wu is old, why aren't you sitting in the carriage?" Her jade-like face stiffened as she glared at the people beside her and scolded, "What are you all doing?" Steward Wu quickly said, "It's not their business, it's this old man who has something to discuss with Madam." Madame Wang sighed. "Steward Wu is an old man in my family. If there's anything, you can just send someone to inform me and I'll come over myself. Why do you need to come personally?" The old steward looked worried. "Madam, the 10 batches of Guang tea and 100 baskets of spring fruit are needed by Huiju Daoist Palace. They're worth tens of thousands of gold taels, we can't afford to lose any of them." Madame Wang understood the meaning of his words. She glanced at him and said, "Steward Wu, are you worried that the 2 Taoists are not from the right path?" The old steward nodded and said, "The 2 of them are strange, we have to be careful." Madame Wang's expression did not change. She looked down and said, "Steward Wu, you're worrying too much. If the 2 of them had malicious intentions, they could have done it immediately. There's no need to make such a fuss. Moreover, don't we have the Daoist Palace protectors you hired? What's there to be afraid of?" Steward Wu tried to persuade Madame Wang a few more times, but seeing that Madame Wang insisted on her own opinion and refused to chase them away, he could only sigh sorrowfully and return to his carriage. When he reached his carriage, he pulled open the curtain and saw a vigorous middle-aged man of about 40 years old sitting upright inside. His eyes were spirited, his joints were thick, and his bearing was extraordinary. Steward Wu hurriedly paid his respects and said, "Greetings, Commander Qi." The middle-aged man glanced at him and asked, "How is it?" Steward Wu said hatefully, "The 2 Taoists seem to have some skills. The little girl knows how to take advantage of the situation, I wonder who she learned it from." The middle-aged man said, "They're just 2 wild Taoists, they won't be a hindrance. We'll just take care of them at the same time." To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 429. The road to Song country was hidden deep inside the mountain. After the caravan passed through a lush ancient forest, they entered a cave wall under the guidance of a horse that knew the way. The cave was interconnected and had thousands of ravines. Without someone who knew the way to lead the way, it would be very difficult to find the right path. The caravan moved along the winding path and it was drizzling at this moment. The men were all wearing straw raincoats and holding bamboo hats in their hands. A few of the women of the caravan entered the carriage to hide, while others held up oil paper umbrellas with patterns of flowers, birds, fishes, and insects. Under the green bamboo umbrellas, there were bright and beautiful brocade dresses that swayed along with their footsteps. In an instant, it was alluring and beautiful. There was a carriage with 8 horses in the caravan. At this moment, the curtain was suddenly lifted and the Yugu true spirit poked its head out. It looked from the front to the back with great interest and winked at them from time to time, which even made a few women giggle. Zhang Yan shook his head slightly. That Madame Wang had originally prepared a carriage for each of them, but these days, whenever this Yugu true spirit met a beautiful woman, he would go up to chat and tease her. Unfortunately, he had a good appearance, which attracted the hearts of many women. There was even a married woman who had sent over a bamboo book. Only now did Zhang Yan understand why Sect Master Qin didn't release this magic treasure. It was because he kept it by his side to prevent it from causing trouble. Fortunately, this carriage was extremely spacious and could seat 5 to 6 people. The interior was also comfortable and exquisite. There were gold and silver utensils and toiletries. Beside the carriage was a golden cage with golden wires. Inside the cage was a golden pheasant that could ward off evil and report the time. It was fed by someone every day. From these small details, one could see that it was indeed true to say that Middle Pillar continent was the richest land in the 9 continents. The Yugu true spirit looked at it for a while longer and felt bored. It retreated back into the carriage and leaned lazily on the thick cushion. Wine never left his hand. He took the wine pot and poured a mouthful of sweet and mellow wine. Smacking his lips, he suddenly turned around and said, "Mountain River child, no wonder you said this Middle Pillar divine continent is a land of wealth and gentleness. Just by looking at the luxurious clothing in a prosperous place, you can tell that it's not something that an ordinary citizen of the Donghua continent can afford." Since ancient times, there were very few people who could ascend to the Tao in the Pillar divine state. Many cultivators knew that it was difficult to reach the Tao, so they all enjoyed life and happiness. In this continent, the nobles, generals, and ministers used gold, pearls, jade, and other external objects to win over cultivators, such as Qi, Song and Wei, these countries with strong national strength. Every year they have to mobilize millions of people to chop mountains and chisel stones, cut down forests to open roads, build temples and monasteries on dangerous mountains and precipitous cliffs, and worship incense. It was as if other places were abusing the power of the people. Since a long time ago, the land here was fertile and the natural resources were abundant. Moreover, there were few weapons and soldiers. That was why it could sustain such a huge consumption. Along the way, the caravan had already seen a few beautifully decorated temples with richly ornamented beams and painted rafters. Every time they approached, waves of zither music and the sound of bells would resound from within. Those who heard it would be so happy that they forgot about their worries. Such a fertile land was the easiest to wear down one's willpower. Cultivators were also like nobles and princes, wearing brocade and jade robes all day, traveling in carriages and listening to music. They were extremely extravagant, and most of them were deeply immersed in the web of the mortal world. They couldn't extricate themselves. Zhang Yan heard the words of the fish drum true spirit, and it seemed like it had been to many places before. Thinking that he still didn't know its background, he asked, "I still haven't asked, which ancestor did Uncle Master follow back then?" The fish drum true spirit put down the wine pot and wiped the corner of its mouth with its sleeve. It chuckled and said proudly, "Martial nephew, listen carefully. I was refined by the 3rd generation sect master Yuan Zhongzi. After I obtained my true consciousness, I was repeatedly refined by the 2 generations of sect masters, and finally ended up in the hands of the current sect master Qin. Just now, I've given birth to a true spirit." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows in surprise. He didn't think that this fish drum of valor actually had such a great background. He had also heard from Zhou Changju that the founder of Qinsang School was Master Tai Ming, but he wasn't a person of the 9 continents. He came from beyond the heavens, and after he established Qinsang School, he disappeared after 100 years. The 2nd generation sect master was originally his attendant boy, who was now the ancestor of the Chen clan. The 3rd generation sect master, Yuan Zhongzi, was the first disciple of the great underworld spiritual master. He was the one who had truly established the foundation of the Dark Azure sect, and was also one of the ancestral masters who had broken through the realm and ascended. With this calculation, this fish drum of valor had already passed through the hands of 4 generations of sect masters, and its aptitude was far beyond his imagination. But he didn't know why the successive sect masters would refine such a magic treasure that couldn't be used for fighting or killing. In his heart, Zhang Yan didn't believe that they didn't have a purpose, but with his current cultivation, he still didn't know the secret. At this moment, he heard someone shouting from outside, "The rain has stopped." Zhang Yan didn't want to sit in the carriage for a long time, so he got off the carriage. After the light rain, there was a slight dampness. The air in the ravine was smooth, and the warm wind blew, and the sound of birds and insects could be heard in the ethereal valley. At this moment, he didn't know how deep into the mountain, but he could faintly hear the sound of clear spring water, and the rocks were wet with moss. At the corner of the road. Because the rain and mist had dispersed, there were still colorful, illusory, and glittering lights shining brightly. After another half an hour, he arrived at an open land. He saw a smooth and flat towering stone wall, in which there were niches, and there were more than 1,000 stone statues. Among them, there was a particularly tall stone statue, hidden in the wall of the shrine. It was exquisitely carved, and its face was lifelike, like a real person. Zhang Yan noticed that although there weren't any formations here, there weren't any broken branches or leaves on the stone statue. Even in some of the dark corners, there wasn't any filth. It was obvious that there were people who cleaned it often. At this moment, there was a commotion in the group, and many people left the group. They ran forward, knelt down, and burned the statues, prayed, and worshipped. They looked very sincere. Zhang Yan waved his hand and called Steward Qiu to his side. He pointed at him and asked, "Which perfected one is worshipping here?" Steward Qiu cupped his hands and said seriously, "Celestial Master, this is Lai Xian Sect's ancestor, Venerable Iya." Steward Qiu pointed at the surroundings and said, "In the past, Venerable Iya came here to cultivate, and he took a fancy to this place. He cultivated here for more than 500 years, and in the end, he saw through the mystery and became an immortal. Back then, demons ran amok in this place, and he and his disciple protected the living. The people were grateful, and they built a statue to worship him. Now, there's a Iya temple in Hanjing of the country of Song. It's filled with incense, and it's very effective. This person is also an immortal of the Tao sect. Why don't you go and pay your respects to him?" The Yugu true spirit pouted and said, "What immortal? There has never been a person who ascended in the middle pillar state. If we go by lifespan, I think he's too young to call me grandpa." Steward Qiu was shocked, and he said, "Sir, it's fine to say this here, but if you go to Hanjing, you must not blaspheme this immortal. In the country of Song, most of them are this immortal's disciples." He looked left and right again, then lowered his voice and said, "Even the carriage guards in the caravan, there are many disciples from the Lai Xian sect." At this moment, Zhang Yan saw some of the disciples taking out a book and reading it. He pointed at it and asked, "What book is that?" Steward Qiu took a look and said, "This is the Tao scripture that Venerable Iya wrote that day." Tao scripture? Zhang Yan raised his brows. There were many cultivators in the world. But to directly refer to his own writings as Tao scripture was something that even the great cultivators of the past did not dare to do. Thus, he said, "Let me take a look." Steward Qiu quickly fetched it and handed it to Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan took a few glances at it and smiled, then he passed it to the Yugu true spirit. The Yugu true spirit also took a few glances at it. It sneered and said, "And here I was wondering how great it was. Turns out it's just a hodgepodge of over 100 Tao scriptures to deceive the ignorant." Steward Qiu's face turned pale, and he quickly looked around. When he saw that no one heard him, he finally relaxed. Zhang Yan put his hands behind his back and said, "Venerable Iya is the founder of a sect, so he shouldn't be so shallow, nor would he be so arrogant. It might be a fake." The Yugu true spirit agreed, "It's most likely. Venerable Iya did have a lot of disciples, but Zhang Yan had seen them. Among this caravan, more than half of them were here to offer incense. After offering their prayers for 2 hours, the caravan just now, they were back on the road again. However, they didn't go far when they heard a commotion in front of them. The caravan stopped, and this alerted Madame Wang, who was at the back. She got off the carriage with her 2 maids. She found a guard and asked, "What happened?" The guard said fearfully, "The ropeway on the cliff in front has been cut off for some reason, there's no way out." Madame Wang frowned and said, "Bring me there." The guard quickly led the way, and after walking for less than 200 steps, they saw that the ropeway that was originally connected by iron chains had been cut off, and they could vaguely see the opposite cliff. Below them was a ravine that was tens of thousands of feet long, and unless they flew in the air, it was impossible to cross it. Madame Wang was extremely daring. She stood at the edge of the cliff for a while and suddenly said, "Find a few people to drag the iron chains up." Not long after, dozens of people came and dragged the iron chains up. Madame Wang walked forward and carefully looked at the cut. Seeing that the cut was neat, it was obvious that it was cut by a sharp divine weapon. She immediately knew that someone did it on purpose. However, on the surface, she did not show it. She instructed the people to put down the iron chains, and return to the caravan. At this moment, she saw Steward Wu rushing over with the help of a crutch. He said while panting, "Madam, I heard that the iron chains are broken." "How can this be? How can this be?" Madame Wang sighed and said, "Perhaps it was the doing of the demons in the mountains, but now it's difficult. My knowledge is shallow, but the old steward is experienced and knowledgeable, and is familiar with the roads in the mountains. I wonder if there's another way to Shangjing." Steward Wu stroked his beard and pondered for a moment before he said, "If this road is blocked, we'll have to take a detour and take a shortcut out of the low-lying valley to reach the mainland." However, a Taoist priest Jikong came to the low-lying valley 2 years ago and took in a few disciples. He also abducted thousands of peasants and built a Taoist temple there. Usually, he collects money from the temple, but I heard that his disciples are black-hearted and ruthless. They demand at least 70% of the money. If we head in that direction, Madame Wang said decisively, money can be earned again, but the goods must be delivered. If we offend the palace, not only will we be in trouble, we will also implicate our children and relatives. Steward Wu could only sigh repeatedly and kept saying, "Fate, fate." Madame Wang returned to the carriage. After entering the carriage, her expression was solemn. Ever since her husband and father-in-law passed away, this was the first time she led a caravan to this place. However, she had asked around beforehand. Other than the cableway at the Ghost Cliff, there were 2 other roads leading to the Kingdom of Song. However, Steward Wu only said one and did not say anything. There must be something wrong. Earlier, she already felt that Steward Wu's actions were suspicious. Now, she was even more certain. She could also imagine that even if she just now suggested taking the other road, if Steward Wu had any arrangements, he would not have missed it. She could be considered a heroine among women. She did not panic when faced with trouble and kept thinking of countermeasures in her mind. Not long after, she raised her head and called for a maidservant. "Invite the 2 Taoists over." Without waiting for the maidservant to leave, she suddenly stood up and stopped the maidservant. She said, "Wait, it's better for me to go personally." To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.